Chapter 40:11. A deafening roar rang out, accompanied by a sharp aura. This was an extremely shocking scene. From a distance, the neat formation looked like a piece of black cloth, bringing with it a towering aura that swept through everything. Walking at the front was a huge reptile that was slowly moving. It looked like a lizard, but was much larger than a lizard. Behind it was a war chariot. The war chariot was very simple, not exquisite at all. It looked like a war chariot from ancient times, but it gave off an extremely domineering feeling. There were mottled marks on the war chariot that were very deep. It was unknown how much blood had been spilled, but after the color had changed, it had formed a dark color. Standing on the war chariot was a man in a black robe. He wore a crown with 12 curtains on his head, and a vertical bead curtain covered his face. His figure was not even as big as a lizard's leg, but standing on the war chariot, no one could ignore him. This kind of domineering aura instantly crushed the Origin King who was talking nonsense. This was simply the scene that the Origin King had imagined, standing at the top with a large entourage. The sound of a powerful army, the cold and sharp aura pierced into his pores, causing his hair to stand on end, making him shiver uncontrollably. Ning Shu and Fa Tian looked at the man on the war chariot from afar. This man looked a little familiar. The Origin King let out a breath of turbid air, feeling extremely uncomfortable in his heart. He wished he could pull the person on the war chariot down and stand on it himself. This should have been his. It was perfectly in line with his imagination. His heart was surging, and his internal organs seemed to have been splashed with sparks, crackling and burning, causing him incomparable pain. The Origin King clutched his chest, his face twisted in pain, and suddenly coughed up a mouthful of blood. Ning Shu and Fa Tian both turned to look at the Origin King. The Origin King's vitality seemed to have been sucked away as he smiled bitterly. Ning Shu, he was speechless. Just looking at it made him vomit blood. If such a team came to attack them, wouldn't they be scared to death? They might as well commit suicide. The Origin King's mentality was probably not good to begin with, and after seeing this scene, his spirit was crushed. Ning Shu sneered in his heart. The Void King was not wrong, what was wrong was his inexplicable concept. Juandui's passing, even though they were very far away, was enough to make one's scalp go numb. He couldn't help but hold his breath as the huge flag fluttered in the air. The flag fluttered in the wind, moving forward with an indomitable spirit. Wherever it went, no one would back down. The man on the war chariot didn't even bat an eyelid. His eyes were fixed straight ahead, firm and unshakable like a boulder. He then looked at the King of Void Kings beside him. Ning Shu felt that anyone with eyes would know what to choose. Soon, the group became smaller and smaller, turning into a black dot and disappearing. Ning Shu exhaled and asked Fa Tian, "I think he looks like Li Wen." Fa Tian furrowed his brows and thought for a moment, then said, "He is a mortal with the naked eye, a human from an ordinary small world. His lifespan is limited, and it is not enough for him to live until now." Ning Shu said, "There are many ways to come back to life in the void. Besides, Li Wen is no longer an ordinary creature from a small world." However, Fa Tian was concerned about another thing: where are they going? And, the little mouse is not with him. After Fa Tian realized that this might be an acquaintance, he began to look for the little mouse. If he hadn't seen Li Wen, Fa Tian would have forgotten that he had resurrected a mouse, but now the mouse was nowhere to be found. He might even have died somewhere. The missing person, Hao Zi, might have been killed. He just didn't know where Li Wen and the others were now. The Origin King, who had a heart attack, listened to the discussion between the two and asked, "Do you know the person in the car?" Ning Shu just said, "Maybe an acquaintance." The Origin King looked at Ning Shu in surprise, "You know such a person?" Ning Shu looked at the Origin King strangely, "Who hasn't known each other when they were weak? Then why don't you go up and recognize each other?" "Why should we recognize each other?" I already said that we knew each other when we were weak. Why should we go up now? Awkward conversation. The Origin King was speechless. Ning Shu asked with a sense of responsibility, are we going to continue shopping? Was the Origin King in the mood to go shopping now? Not at all. So Ning Shu returned to the clan. Except for the Origin King who was injured, everyone else returned in good condition. However, after welcoming a wave of magnificent and hot-blooded Juandue, they returned to the clan and saw another group of people standing neatly to welcome their arrival. Ning Shu looked at the fragrant wind man in a military uniform with an indifferent and cold expression. With such a big lineup, Ning Shu was a little flattered. Since they were already here, why did they still bring gifts? Where were the gifts? The fragrant wind man didn't speak, but Mo Ming, who was standing next to him, was quite helpless. He had to be the bad guy. He walked over to Ning Shu and said, our organization sincerely invites you to be a guest. Ning Shu looked at Mo Ming. There were many medals in front of him. It seemed that Mo Ming had developed quite well and was already the second person. Ning Shu suddenly had an impulse in his heart, and that was to encourage Mo Ming to get rid of the fragrant wind man and become the first person. The more he thought about it, the more restless he became. Ning Shu's eyes immediately lit up like a light bulb. His eyes moved back and forth between the fragrant wind man and Mo Ming. Seeing Mo Ming like this, Ning Shu suddenly thought of Li Wen who stood in a war chariot and looked down on the world. With Mo Ming's luck, if he wanted to develop, he could also develop. But as for whether he had the courage of Li Wen, he didn't know. Thinking about it, the difference between Li Wen and Mo Ming wasn't that big. One was an ancient emperor, and the other was a modern family. Although he wasn't as noble as an emperor, his knowledge and the information he received were far more than Li Wen's era. It could be said that he was standing on the shoulders of giants. However, Mo Ming in the organization couldn't develop to the same level as Li Wen. His upper limit was already limited. There was one more step to reach the peak, and that was to get rid of the fragrant wind man and become the #1 boss of the guards. Ning Shu's eyes were shifty. Mo Ming didn't know what she was thinking and repeated what she said before. Ning Shu, you invited me to be a guest. Mo Ming nodded. Yes. Ning Shu looked at the dense team. There were at least 1,000 souls, and all of them were so solid. They were at least at the level of the golden body of merit. These people are also here to invite me. There are so many of them. Who should I accept? Mo Ming's expression cracked, and his tone was very helpless. No, they are only here to escort you. They are not all here to invite you to be a guest. Shan Yu. Did the grand uncle like this kid so much? He didn't even have 2 tails of meat. Chapter 40:12. The Grim Reaper was there to reap lives. Seizing the souls of others was the spokesperson of death. Could it be that they were going to kill the grand uncle? Anyway, they would know once they went over. They were cleaning up the battlefield and counting the losses and deaths of this battle. When a group of pitch-black Netherworld race members appeared like smoke, the alarm sounded again. They had just gone through a battle and were still exhausted. Now, another wave had appeared. Fragrant Wind Guy had a fiery temper. Now that they were here, he had to be patient and deal with them, asking them what was going on. Were the Netherworld race the kind that would answer people's questions? No, they didn't pay attention to Fragrant Wind Guy at all. This made him feel very awkward. They just stood there and didn't say what they were going to do. Fragrant Wind Guy couldn't be bothered with them. Instead, he ordered people to keep an eye on them and started to mobilize the troops in private. He had seen how powerful the Netherworld race was. Physical attacks were useless, and they were very effective against the soul. Fragrant Wind Guy quickly reported this matter. The battle between the Void races had nothing to do with them. Not long after the Grand Uncle laid down, he was woken up again. He opened his sleepy eyes and stared at Sang Liang. He said in a low voice, "Didn't I tell you not to look for me? What is it again? Can't you solve it? The Netherworld race is stationed outside. Do you think I should inform you about this?" The grand uncle sat up with one leg bent and one arm on his knee. He frowned. The Netherworld race? What are they doing here? Did they make an appointment today? The grand uncle was in a bad mood. This was really annoying. He lay down again. "Come find me when the battle starts." Sang Liang pushed the grand uncle. If the battle starts, the army's methods are probably useless against the Netherworld race. The grand uncle just waved his hand and was too lazy to speak. Sang Liang casually pulled a thin blanket over the grand uncle and turned to leave the cave. The Netherworld race appeared here and didn't move again. They didn't take the initiative to attack, as if they were waiting for something. However, Fragrant Wind Guy didn't let down his guard. Who knew why they were here and what their purpose was? Ning Shu and the others were also waiting. The Netherworld race didn't rush to kill people. Obviously, they weren't here to start a fight. That meant that a new race had been born here. However, no one knew what kind of new race had been born, causing the Netherworld race to wait here in unison. Seeing that there was no danger, Ning Shu relaxed a lot and slowly moved towards the Netherworld race. The Netherworld race didn't care about Ning Shu's actions at all. They just stood there motionlessly. Ning Shu found a place to sit down and propped up his chin to observe what happened next. "You guys sit down too. It's tiring to stand." Ning Shu patted the seat next to him. Fa Tian sat down and rested his head on Ning Shu's shoulder. After a while, he actually fell asleep and started snoring softly. Ning Shu turned back to look at Fa Tian. Fa Tian was already an elegant young man. From her angle, she could see that Fa Tian had very long eyelashes, a straight and delicate nose, thin lips, and cherry blossom-colored hair. Looking at him like this, Fatian was quite good-looking. He was especially pleasing to the eye. Ning Shu adjusted her shoulders so that Fatian could sleep more comfortably. After a long time, Ning Shu yawned. What exactly was going to happen? The shuffling sound became more and more obvious. It wasn't obvious, but it was getting louder and louder. Ning Shu immediately became alert and woke Fa Tian up. "Wake up, wake up." Something happened. Fa Tian rubbed his eyes. "What happened?" "Ning Shu, it seems like an earthquake." The trembling under their feet became louder and louder. In the end, it became more and more intense. Jin Ji accidentally dropped the fruit and it rolled on the ground. Jin Ji chased after the fruit. In the end, a crack appeared on the ground and the fruit fell into the crack. The crack became bigger and bigger, and a tender green grass leaf drilled out. Then, the vine grew bigger and bigger, growing upwards at an extremely fast speed. The vine was still growing, and the sudden situation made everyone very surprised. The grand uncle also came over after being notified. The grand uncle looked at the growing vine and snorted. Interesting. A new race is being born beside this almost dried up sea of law. The birth of a new race would compete for the surrounding energy and vitality. This situation was one disaster after another for the sea of law. The grand uncle's expression was not good. Sometimes, a hero in his twilight years would be like this. The vine grew to the thickness of a person's waist and then stopped growing. Everyone listened to the vine. It was obvious that the Netherworld race's target was the race born from the vine. Ning Shu nodded. It seemed that the Netherworld race's reputation of protecting their young was real. It was probably because the place of birth was special that the Netherworld race came over. A huge flower bloomed on the vine. This flower was as big as a pumpkin. It was snow white and emitted a fragrance. The fragrance was overwhelming. Ning Shu took a deep breath. There was a sweet smell. Ning Shu suddenly drooled. I feel like eating nectar. Jin Ji, who was beside him, nodded frantically, agreeing with Ning Shu's words. Many of these natural living beings were born from plants and trees. They used this medium to transmit power to the living beings. The flowers slowly withered, and finally, a fruit grew out. The fruit was slowly growing again. It took less than an hour from start to finish. What kind of huge energy was this? The fruit grew bigger and bigger. After it stopped growing, it fell from the tree. The fruit fell to the ground with a thud. At the same time, the Grand Uncle and the Netherworld race moved to snatch the fruit. The Netherworld race roared at the Grand Uncle. The huge sound wave was so close that the Grand Uncle took 2 steps back. The Netherworld race successfully obtained the fruit. Ning Shu didn't join the fight. Under such circumstances, he couldn't snatch it. The Netherworld race hugged the fruit. The fruit's shell was like an eggshell, and cracks began to appear. Then, the fruit split open, revealing a thin and weak baby inside. The baby burst into loud cries. It struggled with its limbs and clenched its fists tightly. With a red face, the Netherworld race hugged the baby and kept coaxing it. Ning Shu raised his eyebrows. What kind of race was this? It seemed to be a group favorite. Now, the void seemed to have changed the number of races. There were no longer too many races. Instead, there were only a few. The Netherworld race was probably born. The baby bit its fingers and fell into a deep sleep after crying. The Netherworld race coaxed it. Even the Grim Reaper was gentle. The Netherworld race hugged the baby and turned to leave. The Grand Uncle didn't manage to snatch the baby, so he gave up. The Grand Uncle didn't care much about the baby. If he could snatch it, he would. If he couldn't, he wouldn't. However, the Netherworld race was so good to the baby. This baby probably had a big background. Chapter 40:13. Ning Shu's expression explained everything. The Origin King let out a sigh and said, I want to stay and help you. Ning Shu. Ning Shu snorted and said, forget it. The Origin King in this state not only didn't drag them down but even wanted to help them. The Origin King looked at Ning Shu with bloodshot eyes and asked, what do you mean? Are you looking down on me? Ning Shu snorted and asked, who are you scolding? Fa Tian looked at the Origin King with cold eyes, causing the Origin King to feel a little guilty. Fa Tian said to Ning Shu, next time he scolds, just kill him. We don't have time to pay attention to him. Ning Shu nodded and said, yes, I can't bear to see him being an idiot. The Origin King, what kind of person was this? If he wanted to recruit people in the future, he must not recruit people like this. Offending his superiors and showing his teeth at the slightest provocation, but in the end, he was still scolding him. Ning Shu took out some fruits to eat and said to Fa Tian, let's make something to eat, I want to eat meat. Fa Tian smacked his lips and said, I also want to eat meat. So Ning Shu and Fa Tian went to the small wooden house and made pots and pans in the small world. Fa Tian went to catch some creatures without intelligence. They were not big, but they had a lot of meat and belonged to the lower end of the void's food chain. Jin Ji had already given up on eating and was waiting for Ning Shu and Fa Tian to finish cooking. The taste of the food was not very good, but it was rich and filled with a large table of food. Ning Shu felt that the food he made tasted quite good. While eating, the void suddenly said, is this the best dinner I've ever had? Ning Shu directly took a greasy plate and threw it at her face, shut up, do you want to be beaten? The Origin King wiped his face with a handkerchief and said angrily, there should be a limit to how much you can bully others. Ning Shu said, this is to teach you how to behave. Don't talk nonsense. If it were someone else, it wouldn't be a slap on the plate. It would make you speechless for life. Void King, should I be thanking you? Ning Shu waved his hand. You're welcome. I'm a good young man. I like to help others. The Origin King was so angry that he wanted to throw his chopsticks, but under Fa Tian's gaze, he could only grit his teeth, gently put down his chopsticks, and leave. Fa Tian frowned and said, "This person is even less likable than Jin Ji." She was clearly a creature that had just been born, but her personality had a huge flaw. She couldn't even compare to the pure Jin Ji. Jin Ji didn't even have a personality. He was like a blank piece of paper, only having an appetite. As for the Origin King's personality, it was hard to say. After eating, Ning Shu asked Jin Ji to wash the dishes. Jin Ji looked at Fa Tian, and Fa Tian said, "You've already eaten. You have something to do." Jin Ji had no choice but to wash the dishes obediently. After eating, he felt sleepy, so Ning Shu went to sleep. Ning Shu had already decorated Fa Tian's room, so Fa Tian and Jin Ji shared a room. Ning Shu's consciousness entered the peerless martial art and swam in the sea. Sometimes, he would check on the small worlds at the bottom of the sea. Some small worlds that had just been born might have some problems. Something might have happened during their birth, causing them to die prematurely. Leaving behind wreckage, this kind of wreckage would probably disappear with the passage of time. But how would it disappear? Ning Shu squatted next to the wreckage of the small worlds, squatting and looking, wanting to see how the wreckage would disappear. After watching for a long time, Ning Shu's mental strength saw worms crawling out of the mud in the deep sea. They were the size of a thumb and there weren't many of them. They were shining in the pitch-black deep sea. To be honest, this kind of soft worm wriggling around was a little disgusting. This kind of boneless creature looked a little creepy. Furthermore, Ning Shu didn't know that there were such creatures in the sea. When did this creature appear in the sea? She actually didn't know. These worms that emitted a soft light began to surround the broken world and slowly gnaw on the fragments of the world. Ning Shu suddenly felt that these wriggling worms were much cuter. They could eat the fragments of the world and return the energy to the peerless martial art through excretion. It could be considered a reuse of energy. It was a little like the immune phagocytes in the body, devouring dead cells. In that case, Ning Shu needed to do very little. From the birth of the world to its death, Ning Shu didn't need to interfere. The peerless martial art could resolve it on its own. However, Ning Shu was worried about another thing. The phagocytes might swallow the intact cells. Ning Shu stared at the worms and slowly finished eating a broken world. After eating the broken world, the worms burrowed back into the mud. This time, Ning Shu was relieved. It seemed that these obedient worms knew what they were doing and only knew how to eat broken worlds. Ning Shu was very happy. This meant that he didn't have to pick up fragments all the time. Picking up fragments was tiring and heartbreaking. Ning Shu felt that the peerless martial art was much more intelligent than the average plane's birthplace. At least it knew how to deal with the plane's trash. This was something that Ning Shu didn't see in the other plane's birthplace. Ning Shu left the peerless martial art in satisfaction. His consciousness returned to his body. When he opened his eyes, there were two people sitting next to him. They stared straight at Ning Shu. Ning Shu was speechless. When she was sleeping, did she grind her teeth, fart, or talk in her sleep? Ning Shu sat up expressionlessly. "What are you doing?" Fa Tian said, "Senior uncle and the others are here. They're waiting in the hall." Ning Shu replied with an "oh," and asked casually, "When did you come?" "They've been here for a long time." Ning Shu was a little surprised. They'd been here for a long time, but they'd been waiting here. This was rare, but it meant that it wasn't a good thing. Ning Shu wiped the dirt from the corner of his eyes, washed his face, and then came to a very simple living room. Only two people came this time, Sang Liang and Senior Uncle. Ning Shu really felt that the two of them were wearing the same pair of pants. They were like conjoined twins. Everywhere they went, there were two of them. Who couldn't leave who? Ning Shu felt that it was necessary to deeply analyze the relationship between the two. Ning Shu sat on the main seat without hesitation. He picked up the teacup and drank a mouthful of boiled water. When the boiled water entered his mouth, it was so hot that Ning Shu's face frowned slightly. It rolled around in his mouth twice and quickly suppressed it. Oh my God, who did this? Ning Shu looked at Fa Tian. Fa Tian saw that Ning Shu's face was red. He probably guessed it and glanced at Jin Ji. Jin Ji was suddenly noticed by the two of them. She didn't know what was going on and was very confused. However, she was still chewing in her mouth. Ning Shu turned his head. He couldn't hit the child in front of outsiders. He had to give the child self-respect. Why are you looking for me? Tell me what you have to say. I can't be bothered to listen to your nonsense. He was loyal and righteous, but he acted according to the principles of business. This was the biggest feeling Ning Shu had for Sang Liang and even the entire organization. If there was anything, just say it directly. There was no need to talk about other inexplicable things. Chapter 40-14. Earthworm and the others still lived here. When Ning Shu came here, there were children of all sizes in the courtyard. There were too many children, and Ning Shu couldn't remember at all. Earthworm was still thin and weak. He looked a little bookish, and one couldn't tell that his original form was an earthworm at all. It was just that after so many years, Earthworm didn't age at all. When Earthworm saw Ning Shu, he rolled his eyes without any care for his image. Why are you only here now? Oh, I have something to do. You know that I have to run around various small worlds when I have nothing to do, Ning Shu said. Where's Yaonyang? Earthworm sighed. She's been dead for more than a month because she was sick. She left quite quickly. Not long after, her man followed her. Ning Shu was stunned. That shouldn't be. She was fine the last time I saw her. Life was unpredictable. Earthworm sighed. Yes, life is unpredictable. I don't plan to stay here anymore. I'll walk around in the future. Ning Shu looked at Earthworm's face. He was very haggard, and there were bruises under his eyes. He seemed to be in low spirits. It seemed that he was sad because of Yaonyang's death. Ning Shu's heart stung. He didn't feel much, but his heart felt a little numb. When he entered the house, he saw Yaonyang's memorial tablet. In front of it was a brand new incense burner with lit incense sticks. The house was filled with a fragrance. This is... Yaonyang's son saw Ning Shu and asked Earthworm. Earthworm only said, the child of a friend of mine. Ning Shu raised his eyebrows. Earthworm had raised his seniority without permission again. Earthworm took the package and prepared to leave. Yaonyang's son couldn't help but ask, why are you leaving? I'm going out for a walk. Don't wait for me. I don't know when I'll be back. Earthworm ignored their urging and left with Ning Shu. When he left, he kept looking back. Ning Shu said, if you can't bear to leave, then don't leave. The earthworm shook its head. I have no choice but to leave. According to the age of you two-legged monsters, I'm already very old. I haven't aged yet, and I haven't died yet. I don't expect to be dismembered when the time comes. I'd rather leave when the time is right. After all, not everyone is like Yaonyang. He was the one who brought Yaonyang up. In the past, their family relationship was very simple, but it wasn't the same anymore. With so many people around, everyone had their own agendas. Earthworm didn't want to think too badly of Yaonyang's child, but he didn't dare to think too highly of her either. Moreover, once there were more people, not everyone would have a good relationship with them. Ning Shu looked at the earthworm. I didn't expect you to be so wise. That's right, some people don't dare to face death. They will use all their strength and even crazy methods to save their own lives. But once the earthworm left, he would be alone. It would be quite lonely. The earthworm said, "It's okay. I can wander around the world. I've been taking care of the child before. Now, I'm free." As he spoke, he looked at Ning Shu with some resentment. Ning Shu immediately comforted him. "Okay, okay. It's all my fault. I was the one who asked you to take care of the child. Now, you don't have to." The earthworm rolled his eyes even wider. These were the words of a scumbag. What a scumbag. Ning Shu said, "Where are you going to play? I'll accompany you for a while." The earthworm spat. "Do you think I want you to accompany me? What a scumbag." Ning Shu shrugged. "All right, I'll take it that you're accompanying me. I have to look for the little mouse. Whether it's dead or alive, I have to find out." The earthworm said, "Go ahead." Ning Shu and the earthworm began a wandering life. Every day, they would eat and sleep in the open. However, they thought that they were heroes who walked between heaven and earth. He would not rob the rich to give to the poor. To Ning Shu, it did not matter if they had money or not. It was all the same to him. He would not get involved in these matters. Occasionally, he would lend a helping hand when he saw injustice. The people he helped would also occasionally give him some compensation. Ning Shu would accept it without any hesitation. When they passed by town, they had to eat, drink, and have fun. When the earthworm saw Ning Shu having so much fun, he could not help but ask, "Do you remember what you came here for?" Ning Shu nodded. "Of course I do. But that doesn't stop me from eating and having fun. Besides, there's no little mouse here." He did not know if the little mouse was still in this world. Was it dead or had left? In short, it was unknown whether it was still alive. As the earthworm was very good-looking, some of the young ladies from big families who came out to shop would sometimes throw sachets at him. Ning Shu beamed as she asked the earthworm, "Is there anyone you like? Find a woman you like and live an ordinary life for decades." The earthworm looked at her as if she was retarded. "Are you stupid? With my looks, do you think it's normal for me to find an ordinary woman with a face full of wrinkles while I'm still a young hunk? Any woman would have a mental breakdown." Ning Shu exclaimed, "You're really confident in yourself." The earthworm scoffed. "I know human nature too well. Maybe the woman I love will eat me up, even if it's only in name, so that she can stay young forever." Ning Shu looked around at the girls who were shy and afraid of the earthworm. Their feelings for him had really been ignored. Ning Shu and Fa Tian walked and stopped along the way as they headed towards the largest capital. Since they were already here, they might as well go to the big city to try their luck. Moreover, there were many nobles and princes in the big city, and there was also an emperor. Ning Shu felt that Little Mouse liked people with strong luck, just like how it had chosen Li Wen. If Little Mouse was still alive and had lost its memory, it would find a lucky human to play with. For some reason, Ning Shu felt a little happy. Now, Little Mouse was like an amnesiac wife who had forgotten Li Wen, the scumbag CEO. Amnesiac and didn't remember the scumbag, but the scumbag remembered the Little Mouse who had done so much for him, but he ignored it. Now that Little Mouse had found a new companion, Li Wen must be very disappointed. Ning Shu was so excited that his whole body was trembling. How interesting. Little Mouse was speechless. Was she crazy? Why was she so excited? What kind of illness was she? The big city was indeed different from those small places. The buildings were magnificent, and the bluestone streets in the city were wide enough to drive 5-horse carriages side by side. The people coming and going were all well-dressed people. It seemed that the people in the big city were very wealthy. Ning Shu and Little Mouse were like country bumpkins, and their clothes were old and tattered. The pedestrians looked over and then looked away. Their faces were filled with disdain and a sense of superiority. Ning Shu and the earthworm didn't care about these people's gazes. They found a luxurious inn to stay in and slowly looked for Little Mouse. Chapter 40:15. Ning Shu's expression was very serious. It was as if he would rather die than live in dishonor. When Jin Ji saw that the cup in front of Ning Shu was empty, he obediently carried the small kettle and poured a cup of hot water for Ning Shu. Ning Shu glanced at the teacup and moved away. Jin Ji probably didn't have the concept of temperature. He couldn't feel cold or hot. When the hot water was served, Ning Shu suddenly wanted to open his mouth and pour the kettle of water directly into Jin Ji's mouth. What a sensible child. Sang Liang looked at Ning Shu. Do you have to do this? Do you have to use this method? Ning Shu raised his chin. Of course. Ning Shu looked at senior uncle provocatively. Beg me? Can you even open your mouth? His dignity probably wouldn't allow him to beg an ant. She was such a weak ant. The atmosphere was on the verge of exploding. Ning Shu had a provocative smile on his face, while senior uncle just looked at him calmly. Sang Liang reached out and pressed his hand on senior uncle's wrist, shaking his head at him. Obviously, he didn't want senior uncle to suffer such humiliation. Fa Tian's body tensed up. He was ready to fight. Of course, Ning Shu also felt that senior uncle wouldn't open his mouth. She was deliberately making things difficult for him. If you don't give me anything, I'll humiliate you. Only Jin Ji didn't feel the atmosphere at all. He was still eating. Beside him, the Origin King was simply baffled. He had inexplicably pulled him over, and then, he was here now. He couldn't leave, and he couldn't stay either. The people who had beaten him were all in this room. He wanted to beat these two groups of people, but he couldn't. Ning Shu said, say it. If you beg me, I'll give it to you. Senior uncle said calmly, I beg you. Ning Shu's expression froze for a moment. Say it again. The Grand Elder repeated, still as calm as ever, I beg you. Ning Shu instantly exploded. Can't you have a little bit of humiliation? You don't even have the slightest bit of humiliation when you ask for help. You don't even feel ashamed or humiliated. There was no pleasure in humiliating others at all. As the humiliator, Ning Shu didn't feel happy at all. He didn't get what he wanted. Looking at the Grand Uncle's expression, he didn't seem to feel humiliated at all. He didn't seem to know what humiliation was. Sang Liang obviously didn't expect Ning Shu to say that, but he immediately reacted and said to Ning Shu, give it to us. Fa Tian clicked his tongue and looked at Ning Shu. Ning Shu opened his mouth and made a sound, but didn't say anything. Who would have thought that you would be such a hoodlum? You just opened your mouth like that and didn't hold back at all. How disappointing. Ning Shu had expected the Grand Elder to send an army over. However, the Grand Elder's reaction was completely unexpected. Thinking about it, it made sense. He could get what he wanted just by saying 2 words. Sang Liang frowned. We've already met your request. Are you going to go back on your word? Ning Shu, I am that kind of person. Ning Shu reached out to Fa Tian. Fa Tian was also quite helpless. He actually took out a bottle of water. Ning Shu rolled his eyes very unhappily. Fa Tian directly threw the bottle over. Sang Liang caught it and opened the bottle to feel it carefully. He almost touched it with his hand and put it in his mouth to taste it. Sang Liang nodded to the Grand Elder, and then the two of them left. They left so calmly as if they were going shopping. Fa Tian looked at Ning Shu. Ning Shu forcibly saved his dignity. He thinks he's making a profit, but I'll never make a loss. I'm the supplier. If I cut off my supply, how humiliating would it be to rely on other people's charity to survive? Even if you beg me countless times, it won't work. Fation. I had nothing to do before. In fact, there wasn't much water left. He couldn't provide it even if he wanted to. Ning Shu said directly, I gave you a little this time. Next time, do you think you can get something just by begging me? Dream on. I can see that the Grand Elder is purely shameless. If he didn't have the face to talk about shame, he didn't have any shame. It was useless to talk about dignity and self-esteem with the Grand Elder. Moreover, with the Grand Elder's level of arrogance and shamelessness, how could they care about the honor and disgrace of an ant at their feet? Fuck, being angry with a person like the Grand Elder would only kill oneself. Even Sang Liang had a slight sense of dignity, but the Grand Elder didn't. He had probably separated himself from things like honor and disgrace and face. It was like a person who was very sympathetic and wanted to slaughter a pig. He couldn't bear it and said sorry, then stabbed it to death and let it bleed. Words and actions were never related. The Grand Elder didn't lose anything by begging him. He would still do what he should do. As for losing face, did he care? Running in front of him for no reason, did he want to die? He was really careless. If he had known this would happen, he would have asked the Grand Elder and the others for some benefits. However, things were like this. They thought they had earned, but he would never lose out. Ning Shu suddenly remembered something. He picked up the kettle on the table and said gently to Jin Ji, good boy, open your mouth. Jin Ji obediently opened his mouth. Ning Shu poured a few drops of water in. Is it hot? Jin Ji shook his head. It's not hot. Ning Shu originally wanted to teach this child a lesson. If he said it was hot, he would tell him not to pour tea for others with water. However, he said it wasn't hot. Ning Shu's face was cold. Open your mouth. Then, he poured the entire kettle of water into Jin Ji's mouth. Jin Ji's throat was like a funnel, catching all the water and swallowing it. The Hollow King could finally ask, why are you looking for me? He just stood there and watched, baffled, as if he didn't know what was going on. Ning Shu said casually, I thought they were here to investigate the matter of you jumping into the spring and polluting the spring water, so I was going to hand you over. The Hollow King suffered a critical blow. His heart, which was riddled with holes, was on the verge of collapsing. To be honest, after leaving the abyss, to a certain extent, the Hollow King relied on Ning Shu. Now that Ning Shu had said this so casually, as if she wanted to hand him over, the Origin King felt quite uncomfortable. The Hollow King, you're just going to hand me over like this? Ning Shu, you're still here. Obviously, they don't care about the bathwater at all. The Hollow King, stop changing the topic. Ning Shu saw that the Hollow King was very angry and knew what he meant. He just said, you and I are strangers, and I'm just your guide, not someone else. I have no obligation to risk my life for you. If you're a friend I recognize, that's fine. The Hollow King said awkwardly, in my heart, to a certain extent, you're also my friend. Ning Shu shook his head. But in my heart, you're not my friend. Chapter 40:16. The carriage drove past them. From the beginning to the end, the little mouse didn't even look at them. It lay on the shoulder of the young master of the Duke's mansion as if it was asleep. Ning Shu asked, what's going on? What should we do next? Ning Shu said directly, let's just wait for that person to come back. Also, we need to figure out what's going on with the little mouse. Okay. Ning Shu and the earthworm sat on the steps. The guards at the door stared at them and wanted to drive them away, but they were well behaved. They could only let them be. Chu Rui entered the palace and was led into the palace by the eunuch. The emperor was slightly fat and his hair was half black and half white. His face was full of fatigue. Even so, there was elegance between his eyebrows. It could be seen that when he was young, he was a really good man. The emperor looked at Chu Rui with a kind expression and asked him to come closer. Chu Rui walked a few steps with a cold expression. He didn't get close to the emperor and bowed respectfully. The emperor just sighed and didn't care about Chu Rui's behavior. Instead, he asked Chu Rui if he was feeling better and how his studies were going. Even if the emperor tried to find a topic to talk to Chu Rui just answered in a formal way. The emperor clenched his fists and wanted to get angry, but in the end, it turned into deep helplessness. The emperor was in a bad mood and Chu Rui was in a worse mood. He didn't want to stay in the palace for even a second. When he went out of the palace and returned to the duke's mansion, he saw that the two people were still at the door. Chu Rui rubbed his eyebrows. He looked tired and a little impatient. The servant brought a stool and Chu Rui stepped on it to get off the carriage. He ignored Ning Shu and the earthworm. Ning Shu said, "Wait." He stopped in front of Chu Rui. Chu Rui said coldly, "What else do you want?" Ning Shu pointed at the little mouse on his shoulder and said, "This pet is mine." Chu Rui stretched out his hand and covered the little mouse. The sleeping little mouse woke up and chirped. Chu Rui's expression was unfriendly. "What are you talking about? How can it be yours?" The servant immediately jumped out, "How dare you, unruly commoner! Do you know who you are pestering? Second young master's things are yours. Do you think they are yours just because you say so?" Ning Shu looked at little mouse, who was stroking his beard. "What are you doing? Come here." The little mouse looked at Ning Shu inexplicably and then began to wipe his beard with his paws, completely ignoring Ning Shu. Ning Shu's head was full of question marks. He turned to the earthworm and said, "Why don't you give it a try?" Was the little mouse crazy? Earthworm had been with Earthworm for a long time, so it was normal that little mouse did not know her. After all, the last time she saw little mouse, she was still a soul. Now that she had changed her appearance, it was normal for the little mouse not to recognize her. The earthworm called little mouse, but the little mouse was also unfamiliar with the earthworm. This was a bit strange. Chu Rui said impatiently, "That's enough. If you pester me again, don't blame me for being rude." After returning from the palace, Chu Rui was very unhappy and in a bad mood. Now he was being pestered and even said that the silver mouse was theirs. What was he thinking? The servant and the guards came to drive Ning Shu and the earthworm away. Seeing this situation, Ning Shu knew there was no point in pestering them anymore. He had to figure out what was going on first. Moreover, Ning Shu found that the little mouse did not have any power. Was it because it was made of mud and had a shelf life, so its power would slowly disappear? Ning Shu and the earthworm returned to the inn. Ning Shu could not help but mutter, "What do you think the little mouse means? Why did it pretend not to know us?" The earthworm was much calmer. "It's not necessarily pretending not to know us. Maybe it just doesn't know us and doesn't remember us." Ning Shu said, "I'm going to check it out tonight and find out what's going on." The earthworm poured tea in a relaxed manner, took a sip and said, "If it really doesn't recognize us, what are you going to do? Since it has a new life, then it doesn't matter where it lives. It's the same wherever it lives." Ning Shu said directly. She was looking for the little mouse because she wanted to know whether the little mouse was alive or dead. Since she knew the result, she was too lazy to care about other things. As for how to live, it was the little mouse's business. In essence, the current little mouse was mud. No matter how strong the mud was, it would be eroded by the wind and rain. The current little mouse had a lifespan. As for how long the lifespan was, she did not know. The earthworm said, "I'm quite curious. Why do you suddenly want to know whether the mouse is alive or dead?" Naturally, it was because of Li Wen. Because when she saw Li Wen, she wanted to know whether the little mouse was alive or dead. At night, Ning Shu's consciousness floated out of his body and floated to the duke's public house. He found Chu Rui's room. The room was brightly lit. Chu Rui was holding a pen and writing. The silver furball was squatting on the table and eating something. Chu Rui reached out and touched the little mouse. The atmosphere was quiet and warm. Ning Shu stood in front of the table and carefully observed the little mouse. Where did the little mouse's strength go? Moreover, its intelligence was reduced. Although the little mouse's intelligence was a little low, its intelligence was now at the level of an animal. Although it was more intelligent than ordinary animals, it was no longer the little mouse that could speak. Although it used to say stupid things, being able to speak was a symbol of intelligence. Ning Shu glanced at Chu Rui and found that Chu Rui was born weak and his heart was weak. At first glance, it was obvious that he was going to die young. Especially in the ancient times when medical science was not developed, they could only nourish him. But now, there was a power supporting Chu Rui. This power, could it be that the little mouse gave its power to Chu Rui? Ning Shu clicked his tongue. Again and again, the little mouse was still so stupid. It always did this kind of stupid thing. It had no memory of Li Wen. Even after being reborn, it was still the same. Perhaps he should keep Li Wen's memory. With Li Wen's lesson, perhaps the little mouse would not be so stupid. However, some people would not learn from their mistakes. Compared to Chu Rui and Li Wen's lethality was obviously greater. It was better to forget Li Wen. The little mouse might not even know that it was a piece of mud. It was mud made by mixing various kinds of water. Mud without strength would naturally not last long. This little rat, who didn't have any strength, must have lost his IQ to the other party as well. Ning Shu was speechless. He rolled his eyes and was too lazy to look at the stupid little mouse. His consciousness returned to his body. He decided to play for a few more days before leaving. Everyone had their own life. Since the little mouse decided to live his life, he would live his life well. As for how long he could live, all living things would die eventually. Chapter 40:17. The earthworm shook the sleeping Ning Shu awake. It was quite naughty as it insisted on waiting for Ning Shu to fall asleep to shake him awake. Ning Shu was now eating and sleeping well. Not long after returning from the public house, he decided to ignore the little mouse and fell asleep not long after lying down. The earthworm probably did not expect Ning Shu to sleep so much. It shook Ning Shu awake and asked, "You really don't care about it?" Ning Shu said lazily, "What's there to care about? Since this is its decision in life, we are all outsiders. Why should we care?" Ning Shu had thoroughly understood that whether it was the little mouse in the past or the little mouse molded by the rebirth mud, they were all dedicated personalities. As long as it met the right person, it would do its best to contribute. If it met a grateful and warm-hearted person, it would naturally treat the little mouse well. However, if it met a cold-hearted person, its life would be much more difficult. It gave people the feeling that it was so despicable. If the other person did not appreciate it, why did it do so much? Outsiders would feel this way. However, for the little mouse, perhaps dedication could make it feel very happy. It could unilaterally release heat and be moved by itself. As for the reactions of others, it was not something he cared about at all. To a certain extent, this kind of person was very egotistical. They would not listen to outsiders. Ning Shu had already expected this situation, so he was too lazy to care. Moreover, the little mouse did not even recognize him at all. She intervened. In the little mouse's heart, "Who the fuck is this? Why do you care? Who are you? Are you crazy?" The earthworm had lived with the little mouse for a period of time. When it went missing, it searched for a period of time. However, the earthworm only searched in a small area and did not come to the capital. "I feel that it is very weak. We have to find its power back," the earthworm said. After all, it was a spiritual creature. The earthworm and the little mouse were considered the same kind. At this time, it still wanted to help. Ning Shu snorted. It gave its power to the person it wanted to give it to. Besides, if it gets its power back, the other person will be in a lot of danger. That weak and sick young master from the House of High Dukes would not be able to hold on for long. Soon, he would be completely exhausted. He must have been poisoned in his mother's womb. It was not easy for him to live until now. He should have died after being born, or the fetus would have died in the womb. If he was an ordinary person, he would have been reincarnated long ago. To be able to survive until now, he must have spent a lot of manpower, material, and financial resources on him. The luckiest thing for this kind of sickly person was to be born into a wealthy family. However, it was also because he was born into a wealthy family that he suffered such torment. No ordinary family would poison a pregnant woman. He didn't just have a problem with the fetal poison. Instead, it was a series of physical problems caused by the fetal poison. The toxins had seeped into every corner and every cell. He couldn't be saved, but the little mouse had given him its power, allowing him to endure for a period of time. When its power was exhausted, it would be the end of it. Anyway, after walking around the House of High Dukes, Ning Shu had already understood the situation of Little Mouse's new master. Usually, when a person was a pet, they would be a princess. However, the little mouse had found itself a master. The earthworm was still worried and asked, "Then let's just forget about it. We really don't care anymore." Ning Shu hugged the quilt and lay down. "We don't care anymore." It willingly gave its power to its master. This kind of thing is consensual. Why do we have to be the bad guys? The little mouse had no memory and no intelligence. If she ran over and told them about the little mouse, no normal person would believe her. The earthworm also felt that this matter was really difficult to handle. He pulled Ning Shu up. "Since we're already here, we still have to solve this matter." Ning Shu really felt that the phrase, "since we're already here," was really poisonous. She asked, "Then tell me, how do we solve this? We have to respect the little mouse's wishes, right?" The earthworm rolled his eyes. The little mouse's wishes are that its master can be well and alive. Otherwise, it won't give its power to him. So, if we solve the problem of the body of the young master of the House of High Dukes, this matter will be solved easily. Ning Shu was so sleepy. She rubbed her eyes. "What are you thinking about? How do we solve this?" The earthworm said, "Someone like you who can go to the world of samsara to pull people and enter the world of the dead can't solve this problem." "Yes, I can go to the world of samsara to pull people, but the problem is that the body, which is the container of the soul, can't. It's going to collapse and the soul has nowhere to go." Ning Shu was almost drunk. She really didn't want to care about this matter. Moreover, she was worried about another thing in her heart. The earthworm said, "Then solve the problem of the container." Ning Shu couldn't help but ask, "Have you thought about what will happen if the power is returned to the little mouse?" Of course, the little mouse's body can solve this problem. But the problem is that the little mouse has power but no brain. The little mouse is still being played around by others. Someone wanted to use the little mouse's power, but the little mouse could think, but it couldn't. Rather than this, it was better to maintain the status quo and let the young master think that the little mouse was just a pet with intelligence. Chu Rui's identity was special. Even if he had the aura of an emperor, so what? The earthworm looked at Ning Shu. "I think there's a problem with your thinking." Ning Shu tilted her head and asked, "What's the problem?" The earthworm said, "First, this power originally belonged to the little mouse. The little mouse has the right to decide to use this power. Second, you've considered everything except the little mouse. His body is weak. Maybe he will die soon. You can make a move, but you're just watching from the sidelines. What you're thinking about hasn't happened yet. The lives of the little mouse and the young master of the House of High Dukes are urgent matters. Ning Shu sighed. It was probably because he had entered the microcosm too often. Most of the time, he was correcting the problems of the microcosm. It was all from a macro point of view. Some small aspects were neglected or sacrificed. The power that the little mouse possessed was definitely beyond the power system of this world. If it was used by others, the impact would be great. Using it to save a person's life was not necessarily a bad thing. Moreover, Ning Shu hammered the blanket. I really hate Iron for not living up to expectations. Seeing the little mouse like that, the anger in his heart could not be suppressed. This kind of behavior that gave him whatever he wanted made Ning Shu want to beat him to death. It was fine if he licked the first one, but he changed to another. In a way, the second life was given to him by Fa Tian and Ning Shu. This kind of situation was like looking at his disappointing daughter. Angry, angry, angry. Every time he thought about it, he would stomp his slender legs. So angry. Chapter 40:18. Why should he care about this unlucky daughter? He would just pretend that she had never been born. Earthworm asked, do you have the heart to watch it die? I do. Ning Shu pulled the blanket over his head. Stop fooling around. I'm going to sleep. I've stayed up all night. What if I lose my hair? What if I get fat? What if I die? Ning Shu slept without any psychological burden until the next morning. Earthworm brought breakfast into the room. There was also a medicine box on the table. Ning Shu rolled his eyes and pretended that he did not see the medicine box. I refuse like crazy. Damn it. When Ning Shu was eating breakfast, Earthworm said, I've already checked out. We have nowhere to go. Ning Shu was speechless. You're really ruthless. After Ning Shu finished eating, Earthworm carried the medicine box and dragged Ning Shu to the House of High Duke. Standing in front of the House of High Duke, Ning Shu turned around and left. Earthworm grabbed his collar. Since you're already here. Ning Shu said angrily, he can't be saved. Just wait for death. We're not saving him. We're saving Little Mouse. No matter how stupid he is, he's still one of us. We can't just leave him to die. Earthworm politely asked the servant at the door to announce that he was a doctor. He was here to treat the young master's illness. The servant looked at Ning Shu and Earthworm's expressions with suspicion. He asked, You're a doctor? Yes, my ancestors were all doctors. I just came here and heard that the second young master was sick, so I volunteered. Go away. The servant drove Earthworm away. Don't you know what kind of place this is? How can you swindlers come here? How can your medical skills be compared to the imperial doctors in the palace? One by one, they came here under the banner of treating my young master. Don't they just want to be famous? They all call themselves divine doctors and claim that they can snatch people from the king of hell. In the end, they can't even treat my young master's illness. Hope again and again, disappointment again and again. Was it fun to torment people? Ning Shu shrugged and said, See, this is the situation. This is called heaven's will. Compared to Ning Shu's indifference, Earthworm was becoming more and more humane. Even if I want to do it, now is not the time. Ning Shu said. She was determined to teach the little mouse a lesson. The little mouse was like a pile of mud now. It was not as durable as it used to be. It had to think twice before doing anything. Perhaps it felt that such a sacrifice was beautiful. But Ning Shu looked very vexed. Sigh. Even if it was to save Chu Rui's life, Ning Shu didn't disagree, but he put himself in a desperate situation. However, when it came to matters of the heart, only the person who drank the water would know if it was warm or cold. Perhaps if their relationship was good, they would be willing to fight for the other party's survival. Ning Shu had also done something like this in order to fight for a chance of survival. At such a young age, Ning Shu felt that if she sighed every day, she would grow old very early and it would be easy for her to experience the vicissitudes of life. Anyway, the servant guarding the door was determined not to let Ning Shu and the others in. He was such a young doctor, how much did he learn and what experience did he have? He looked like a pretty boy. He wanted to go in and seduce the young ladies of the public house. Dream on. The servant looked at Earthworm's face. His eyes were full of indignation and contempt for the pretty boy. Ning Shu sat down. In this situation, we can only wait. He can't stay in forever. In this life, he really owed the little mouse. His children were all debts. He was either in love or in a rebellious stage. We shouldn't have checked out so early. Are we going to sleep on the streets? Ning Shu couldn't help but say. He felt very tired. He kept on controlling, and he became enemies. So be it. We don't have any money anyway. Don't tell me we don't even have a room after entering the public house. Earthworm was very open-minded. Ning Shu supported his round face and used his spiritual energy to scan the public house's situation. There were many people in the public house. Not counting the servants, just the wives, concubines, and children were very prosperous. Ning Shu was very greedy. The delicately carved food, beautiful and delicious pastries. A rich family. They were really thick-skinned. The servant guarding the door kept rolling his eyes at Ning Shu and Earthworm and chased them away. They were very thick-skinned. They were just around the public house. Don't be a bitch. Finally, Chu Rui left the public house. Ning Shu and Earthworm quickly rushed over. The Earthworm said unhurriedly, "Young master, I can heal your body." Chu Rui, bullshit. Ning Shu, bullshit. What treatment? It was nothing more than using some special methods. Moreover, Ning Shu didn't dare to guarantee that this method would be effective. Was Earthworm so sure that there would be no problem? Who would be responsible if someone died from the treatment? When Chu Rui saw these two people, his first reaction was that they were up to no good. At first, they said that the silver mouse was theirs, but now they said that it was a doctor. Were they not playing with people? I don't need a doctor. However, Chu Rui was still very gentlemanly. He asked the servant beside him to tip some money to Earthworm. What he meant was that the money had been given, so don't look for trouble. Otherwise, he wouldn't be polite. At this time, Ning Shu pointed at the little mouse on Chu Rui's shoulder and said, "It's dying. Don't you feel it? It's very weak and always has no energy. Most of the time, it's sleeping. Other than eating, it was sleeping. It was either a pig or sick." Chu Rui frowned and didn't say anything. He felt that the silver mouse's condition was not good. When he first met the silver mouse, it was very intelligent and understood human nature. Other than not speaking, its behavior was very similar to humans. It liked to eat and play. It was depressed for a long time. Chu Rui was also helpless. He found a doctor, but there was no doctor who could treat the mouse. He couldn't take its pulse. Even the doctor didn't know what illness it had. He couldn't even treat a human's illness, so he had to treat a mouse's illness. The house of Duke was rich and powerful. It was too easy to get some nourishing food. Chu Rui fed a lot of good things to the silver mouse, but it was still depressed and not as lively as before. Chu Rui looked at Ning Shu in surprise. He paused for a moment and asked, "Do you have a way to treat it?" Ning Shu said, "I told you, it's not an ordinary mouse. It used to be mine. I expected this situation." Chu Rui shook his head. "It's mine, and it's not familiar with you. This dead mouse is obviously retarded. If you want to save it, give it to me. If it's too late, this mouse will turn into mud. I'm not lying to you. It's true." Chu Rui was just about to say something, but he coughed twice. The servant beside him quickly handed him a handkerchief. Chu Rui tried to suppress the sound of coughing. His pale face was flushed with a sickly red, which made his face look more lively. Probably because he was too excited, his body was not strong enough. He coughed so hard that his lungs were about to jump out. He put away the handkerchief and asked, "Can you really save it?" Ning Shu said, "Give it to me." Chapter 40:19. Ning Shu reached out for the little mouse. Chu Rui was hesitant. He didn't want to give the little mouse to Ning Shu. He felt that something was wrong. Translator, Henyi Translations Editor, Henyi Translations. Ning Shu said impatiently, "If you don't give it to me, how am I supposed to look at it?" The servant beside Chu Rui immediately defended his master. "How can you say that? Young master is going to be a duke in the future." Ning Shu rolled her eyes. "So what if he's a grand duke? Do you think I'll get any benefits from him? TSK, his body is so weak. Let's not talk about how long he can live, it's already a problem whether he can even have an heir." The servant was so angry that his face turned red. You actually dare to curse my young master? How dare you?" Although this was what everyone was thinking, it was too ugly and awkward for someone to say it so bluntly. The servant quickly said to Chu Rui, "Young master, don't be angry. Beat this lowly person to death. She's offending her superiors and treating a noble like this." Chu Rui's face turned ugly because of Ning Shu's words. However, he was dispirited because what Ning Shu said was the truth. He was just living one day at a time. When would he not be able to see the sun tomorrow? Those who had him in their hearts looked at him with pity and sympathy. Those who hated him and felt that he was blocking their way all wanted him to die immediately. It was such a sad thing to not have a healthy body. Chu Rui was in pain and discomfort. Even the servant felt uncomfortable, let alone Chu Rui. "Young master, you must slap her for talking nonsense," the servant shouted angrily. It was as if he was suffering from Chu Rui's pain. Ning Shu turned and left. He didn't want to care about this matter. He was too lazy to argue with her. Earthworm hesitated for a moment. He carried the medicine box and followed behind Ning Shu. This matter was consensual. Since the other party wasn't willing, then there was no need to force it. In terms of closeness, Earthworm was naturally closer to Ning Shu. When he pulled Ning Shu to care about this matter, he had some friendship with Earthworm. But it was just a bit of friendship. Chu Rui's body staggered twice. He held on to the carriage and rubbed his forehead with his other hand to relieve the tiredness and pain in his body. He said to the servant, "Call them back." Sometimes, people were like this. They didn't cherish what was delivered to their doorstep. Instead, they cherished what they had painstakingly obtained. What you can't get is always in turmoil. Now that he saw Ning Shu and the Earthworm turn around and leave without hesitation, his heart relaxed a little. Then, he panicked, fearing that he would not have this opportunity. The servant was so angry that he wanted to die. He felt aggrieved for his master, but he had no choice but to greet them with a smile and beg them to come back. Ning Shu sneered and turned around. He stopped in front of Chu Rui and stretched out his hand. Chu Rui asked hesitantly, "Can you really cure Haozi and me?" "Ning Shu, let me take a look first." "How will I know what's wrong if you don't show me?" Chu Rui grabbed the silver mouse on his shoulder. The silver mouse almost didn't struggle. Ning Shu grabbed the little rat and threw it on the ground. She stomped on it with her feet, one foot chopping the little rat with both feet. The little rat was dizzy from being stomped on, and it squeaked crazily. The surrounding people were stunned for a few seconds. Looking at Ning Shu's ferocious face, they didn't know how to react. Chu Rui was furious. "What are you doing?" Because he was too emotional, Chu Rui coughed violently. He coughed so hard that he bent over. His whole body was trembling. He pointed at Ning Shu, but he couldn't say a word. Ning Shu picked up the little mouse's tail. The little mouse's fur was stained with mud. It looked like it was breathing more than it was exhaling. Ning Shu lifted her tail and swung it around twice. She felt that the pressure in her chest had loosened a little. She felt much better. You, cough, cough, cough. Chu Rui gasped for breath. The veins on his neck were popping out. He pointed at Ning Shu, but he couldn't say a word. After he vented his anger, Ning Shu took out a fruit and gave it to the little mouse. The little mouse was dying. When it smelled the fragrance of the fruit, it became energetic and stretched out its two front paws to grab the fruit. Ning Shu gave it the fruit. The little mouse wolfed it down. This kind of fruit came from the void. The energy contained in it was what the little mouse needed. The little mouse, which was already as thin as a stick, needed energy very much. The little mouse finished eating and finally felt a little energetic. It stared at Ning Shu with its wet eyes. In the end, it cupped its hands to Ning Shu to express its gratitude. Ning Shu clicked his tongue. Although the little mouse was very smart, it was actually stupid. In the past, the little mouse could talk and think. On the other side, Chu Rui was coughing up blood. He couldn't stop at all. His throat was like a broken wind. He kept gasping for air. The servant was very anxious. He hurriedly went to the residence to find the resident doctor. When the doctor saw Chu Rui like this, he quickly took out a pill and gave it to him. Chu Rui had no strength. He leaned on the servant and looked at Ning Shu speechlessly. If he knew this would happen, he wouldn't have given the silver mouse to her. She didn't want to save people. Instead, she came to vent her anger. Ning Shu said, "What's the problem? Don't you see that it's much more energetic now?" Chu Rui couldn't refute. He was very sullen and angry. When he was agitated, he broke out in cold sweat. His back was numb, and he coughed violently. Ning Shu walked over to Chu Rui. The servant was on guard. "Don't come over. Don't come over." Ning Shu pushed the servant away and patted Chu Rui's back. It sounded like he was beating Chu Rui. Chu Rui was out of breath after being slapped by Ning Shu. There was a lump of anger in his chest that was about to explode. In the end, he couldn't take it anymore and spat out a mouthful of blood. He fainted and fell softly to the ground. "Master!" The servant let out a cry of horror. Then, the house of Duke was in chaos. Chu Rui was carried into the house of Duke. Ning Shu and the earthworm were also surrounded and taken into the house of Duke. Ning Shu said to the servant guarding the door, "Can you get us something to eat? It has to be delicious, exquisite, and more." The servant was speechless. At this time, he still wanted to eat. The servant sneered, "You still want to eat after what you did? Wait to eat in prison." Ning Shu touched his stomach. The food he ate in the morning had been digested. He was very hungry now. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation. "Look, we've been working so hard that we don't even have food to eat." Ning Shu sat on a stool and leaned on the table. She looked weak and listless. The earthworm opened the medicine box and took out a roast chicken. "I bought it in the morning because I expected this result." Ning Shu gnawed on the roast chicken. "What result were you expecting? Judging from your unwillingness, it must be like this. You said you saved people. Why do you have to make it like you're an enemy and make people misunderstand? Are you stupid?" Chapter 40-20. Ning Shu said coldly, "I didn't expect anyone to be grateful at all, and I don't expect this bit of gratitude." She left as soon as the matter was settled. To be honest, she didn't want to care about the little mouse, but if she didn't care, she would feel uneasy. But if she cared, she would feel uncomfortable. Therefore, Ning Shu was very unhappy now. Chu Rui's room was full of people. Several doctors surrounded him, and even the imperial doctors from the palace came. Chu Rui's face was like a dead person, only his chest rose and fell slightly. The duke frowned, and his face was very ugly. His forehead was covered in cold sweat, and he asked the doctor about his son's condition from time to time. "What's the situation now? Is the emperor still waiting for the news in the palace?" The duke was so anxious that he was sweating all over. "The situation is fine. Don't worry, the duke. The young master's condition is very stable." The duke pointed at the person on the bed, dumbfounded. "He looks like he's dead, and you call this fine?" The doctor said, "It doesn't look good now, but the pulse is stable. I believe that he will wake up after a while." The duke's face twitched, and he reluctantly believed the doctor's words. If one doctor was like this, and so many doctors said that he was fine, then he must be fine. Ning Shu was a little sleepy after eating. The silver mouse ran into the room and chirped at Ning Shu. It seemed to be quite energetic. Ning Shu was too lazy to care about it. This kind of mouse was mother to anyone who had milk. After eating it, it would forget about its mother. It ran in front of him because it wanted to eat the fruit. There was no fruit. As for Chu Rui, it couldn't be completely cured. It could only make his body a little better, and the power that the mouse got from Chu Rui was useless. Since the little mouse didn't remember them, there was a way to forget and a life to forget. After this, Ning Shu wouldn't look for the little mouse again. It could be said that he had repaid some kindness. The little mouse chirped and jumped onto Ning Shu's shoulder, grabbing Ning Shu's hair. Ning Shu pushed the little mouse away with a cold expression. Little Mouse's intelligence was limited. All kinds of intimate actions were to please Ning Shu, but Ning Shu didn't buy it at all. He picked up Little Mouse and directly threw Little Mouse out of the window and closed the window. After eating a roast duck, Ning Shu drank several cups of water. He was a little tired of waiting. "Let's go. If you want to go, then go." The earthworm saw that Ning Shu was already at the limit of her endurance, and he would not force her to do something she did not want to do. Ning Shu and the earthworm immediately disappeared from the house. By the time the High Duke arrived, they were already gone. The earthworm asked, "That's it? What else do you want?" I gave the earthworm the fruit. This energy is enough for it to wear down for a while. As for Chu Rui, it will be better after a while, Ning Shu said directly. The earthworm asked, "Then why don't we take back the little mouse's power?" Ning Shu said, "Why should we take it back? We have to respect the little mouse's opinion." The earthworm didn't say anything else. Anyway, his ultimate goal was to save people. Now that the little mouse was saved, the matter was solved perfectly, so there was no need to worry about it. "The matter is solved. Are you going to leave?" the earthworm asked. This guy wouldn't come to the small world if he didn't have something to ask of him. Ning Shu said, "Yes, I'm going to leave." The earthworm curled his lips and said to Ning Shu, "I've thought about it. I want to leave this small world." Ning Shu raised his eyebrows. "Aren't you going to take care of Yang Yang's descendants? The descendants have their own fortune. There are so many people, I can't take care of them all. So, I'd better not care. If I care too much, I'll be hated. Also, my identity is special. What if I get stewed and eaten?" Ning Shu was speechless. "You're really thinking far ahead. Then where do you want to go?" Ning Shu asked. Was he going to the void? "Leave this world. Any world will do. I'm a little tired of staying in this world all the time. It's boring," the earthworm said. Ning Shu was confused. "One world isn't enough for you. Okay, the place I'm staying in is more dangerous, but there are quite a lot of small worlds. Why don't you go to other small worlds? Even the world above 9 Palace Mountain is fine." The earthworm shook his head. "No, I don't want to stay in the world of 9 Palace Mountain. I want to go outside. Ning Shu said, you haven't been to the world of science and technology. Those worlds are fun. The earthworm said, I'll go wherever you go. I'll go out for a walk. Ning Shu shrugged and left this beautiful world with Ning Shu. Not long after they left, Chu Rui woke up. Chu Rui, who had never slept well, woke up very refreshed for the first time. His body was not wet, sticky, or heavy. Translator, Nyoibo Studio Editor, Nyoibo Studio. There were many people waiting on the bed. Chu Rui immediately looked for the little mouse and asked a maid, where's my pet? It's that mouse. He was completely tortured. He was afraid that his pet had been killed or taken away. Or maybe it was taken away by someone. That silver rat was very important to Chu Rui. At least in this huge duke's public house, he could only face all his worries and emotions to that mouse. He did not have to pretend or face the unpredictability of people's hearts. Young master, we'll guard you later. We don't know, the maid immediately said. Chu Rui immediately said, hurry up and look for it. We must find it. Chu Rui was worried that he had been taken away, so he asked another maid, where's a man and a little girl now? The maid said, they've already left. Left? Chu Rui was furious. How could you let them leave? They must have left with the silver mouse. He was actually deceived. The little maid was frightened. Young master, we don't know. We'll go and tell master and let him chase after them. He originally felt very energetic, but now he leaned back tiredly and rubbed his eyebrows. He looked very uncomfortable. A silver light flashed, and a silver ball of light appeared in front of Chu Rui, chirping at him. Chu Rui was surprised. You didn't go with them. You look much more energetic. Chu Rui was a little ashamed. It seemed that the other party was really here to treat the silver mouse. Since they knew the silver mouse so well, then the silver mouse might really be theirs. In a way, it was him who robbed them. He didn't even leave a name before leaving. What a noble character. And if there was no accident, the changes in his body might have something to do with them. Chu Rui was very touched. What kind of moral integrity was this? Chu Rui touched the silver mouse and felt that he had really met a good person. The other party must have done it for the sake of the silver mouse. The silver mouse was really his lucky animal. The good person Ning Shu was ferociously hunting birds, preparing to get some meat for Fatian. He was eating, drinking, and playing in the small world, so he felt a little guilty. Chapter 40-21. Even though the island was relatively safe, there were still people who were bitten by snakes. There were many types of snakes on the island. Some were poisonous, some weren't. The people who were bitten by the snakes were given first aid. Fortunately, no one died. At night, when they were sleeping, there were snakes that crawled into their tents. They were caught off guard and were bitten in their sleep. Also, there were naughty monkeys that would scream and run over to snatch food from the people. When it was time to eat, these monkeys would appear and snatch food from the people. These monkeys were quite smart. After a long time, they figured out the people's movements. Even though there wasn't a murderer, the harsh environment was constantly threatening everyone's lives. After a long time, people's hearts started to waver. They didn't know how long they were going to stay here. No one had discovered them. Could it be that they were going to stay here forever? Far away from the city, far away from the bustling city. There were no high beds and soft pillows. There was no convenient life. Were they going to live like savages, wearing dirty clothes and living in fear every day? Captain, when can we leave? Do you have any contacts? Get someone to come and save us. Fuck, I can't take it anymore. I want to leave this godforsaken place. Once something happened, the captain would immediately become the target of public criticism. These people were like giant babies. No matter what, they would call the captain. Ning Shu felt that if he was the captain, the first thing he would do would be to beat these people until they didn't dare to talk anymore. Calling the captain every day was too pathetic. The captain was very helpless. We've been sending signals every day but we haven't received a reply yet. Let's wait a little longer. Wait for what? Are we going to wait for a lifetime? What's the difference between this and jail? If we're not on the ship, we're on the island. Fuck, what sins did we commit in our previous life? Why do we have to encounter such things in this life? Captain, hurry up. I'll give you 3 days, Captain, fuck, these idiots. Ning Shu chewed on a wild fruit and said to these arrogant and despotic young masters, if you can't wait and don't want to stay here, then hurry up and die. Once you die, everything will be over. You won't have to bear these things. Is there any use in forcing the captain? If you're so capable, do it yourself. Contact your own people. Aren't your families very rich? Why don't you use satellite phones? Hee hee. Trash. The young masters glared fiercely at Ning Shu, but Ning Shu didn't care at all. He was so cowardly that he only dared to be fierce to the captain. He dared to be fierce to the people on the ship who didn't have any background. If he had the ability, he should be fierce to the culprit. Recently, the murderer had not appeared, and these people were tired of living peacefully. After being humiliated like this, these young masters didn't dare to say anything. After all, Ning Shu's battle prowess was there for all to see. However, some of the young masters still took out their cell phones. Things like satellite phones would not be affected by signal problems. It was directly connected to the satellite. Our phones don't work at all. Do you think you're the only one with a brain and we're all fools? Then, he raised the phone in front of Ning Shu. Take a closer look, idiot. Ning Shu looked at the message on his phone. He couldn't connect. This was interesting. It meant that there was something wrong with the magnetic field here. Ning Shu snorted and looked at these young masters sarcastically. You all know that there's no way to contact him, yet you insist on making things difficult for the captain. You even set a time limit of 3 days. Does the captain have more legs or more heads than you? If I see you all chattering to the captain again, be careful that I don't break your dog heads. Being a captain is really tough. I don't care what you eat, drink, pee, or sleep. I still have to be a tree hole every day to receive your negative energy. If you all are so sullen, you can fight to vent it. Don't look for the captain, do you hear me? Ning Shu looked at these people warningly. The captain is under my protection. The captain was so touched that he was about to cry. His eyes were moist. Although his dog head had been broken, there was someone on his side. It was too cool and too warm. These young masters had no choice but to curse. They didn't dare to look for trouble with Ning Shu, and they couldn't look for the captain either. Anyway, each of them looked at Ning Shu with vicious eyes. They were probably going to look for trouble with Ning Shu when they got back. Ning Shu snorted. You guys, you don't even know if you can go back alive, and you're already thinking of looking for trouble with him. It was normal for these young masters to dislike Ning Shu. Wherever she went in society, there would always be people who flattered, followed, and fawned on her. Here, they were treated like this by a nobody model who was usually at their beck and call. They were definitely angry. To be honest, Ning Shu didn't think that these people would be able to go back alive. Why would they be afraid of a dead person? He Jia said, why do you care so much? Ning Shu flicked his hair and said, I've always been a person who will help when I see injustice. I don't like them. He Jia curled his lips. You don't like them. You might have forgotten how hard you tried to curry favor with them. Ning Shu said indifferently, was that trying to curry favor with them? I'm trying to curry favor with money. The calm now was just the calm before the storm. Ning Shu was very excited. Maybe the murderer would show up soon. Was it the same as what she was thinking? Late at night, the sound of the waves mixed with the chirping of birds made people feel like they were floating on the sea, bobbing up and down. In the tent, Ning Shu looked at He Jie, who got up, and asked, "What are you doing?" He Jie paused for a moment. "I'm going to the toilet." Ning Shu sat up. "I'll go with you. You know that I've offended so many people. You're my employer. When we go back, I'm counting on you to protect me a little. So, you can't be killed. Otherwise, when I go back, I won't be able to live. I'll be tortured to death." He Jie, he didn't think that she wouldn't be able to live. Anyway, that was how He Jie felt. Anyone might not be able to live, but she would definitely live better than anyone else. He Jie came out of the tent, followed by a tail. He went to a tree and started to urinate. Because there were many people, there was a lot of garbage. Ning Shu had to be careful to avoid feces and urine. "Be careful." Ning Shu pulled He Jie. "You almost stepped on Papa." He Jie still had a lingering fear. "Thank you." If he stepped on it, it would stink for a long time. Back in the tent, the two lay down and continued to rest. He Jie looked at Ning Shu and asked, "Do you think we can go back?" Ning Shu said casually, "We can't go back." He Jie asked, "Why are you so sure that we can't go back?" Ning Shu rested his head on his arm and stared at the roof of the tent. He said casually, "Whether or not we can go back depends on whether the murderer will let us go. From the looks of it, the murderer won't let us go." He Jie, you seem to know the murderer very well. Ning Shu smiled. "No, I don't know." Chapter 40-22. They spent the night quietly without any murders. When they woke up in the morning, they could see the bright sunlight when they opened the tent. What a good environment. It made people think that they were on vacation. Ning Shu stretched. He had the best sleep since he came to this world. He Jie also came out, but compared to the refreshed Ning Shu, he looked much more dispirited with dark circles under his eyes. It was obvious that he didn't sleep well at night. He Jie was also very helpless. The tent was not big, and the two of them were squeezed in it. She was sprawled out and almost took up the whole tent, squeezing him into a corner. Seeing the state of Ning Shu and He Jie, the passers-by showed ambiguous expressions and made clicking sounds. In such an atmosphere, was there a different kind of fun? How intense was this? He Jie felt as if his body had been hollowed out. He Jie, did these people have nothing but dirty thoughts in their minds? Dirty, bah, the captain and the sailors distributed breakfast. There was not much breakfast, only a piece of bread and half a bottle of water. Such breakfast was not much. Those with big appetites could not even be half full. The captain said, "To be honest, there is not much food on the ship. Next, you may have to look for food and fresh water on the island." Although some people were dissatisfied, there was no other way. After breakfast, everyone went into the forest of the island in pairs. The forest was dense and there were no signs of human activity, so this was an isolated and uninhabited island. This was a bad sign. If there were no signs of human activity on the island, it meant that no one had discovered this place and no one had logged on to this island. This meant that they were getting further and further away from their destination. Unknowingly, they had run to a faraway place, and there was no one to respond to their cries. There were many seabirds resting on the island. There were even monkeys jumping between the trees, making whining sounds, teasing the people under the trees. There were many snakes in the trees and in the grass. This was a very dangerous pirate. The girls were frightened by the snakes that suddenly swam over and screamed. Ning Shu picked up the snakes with a branch and the girls crowded around Ning Shu. Ning Shu used his spiritual power to check the surrounding dangers and made preparations in advance. There was a kind of fruit on the island that the monkeys liked very much. Since the monkeys could eat it, then they could also eat it. They had no choice but to snatch the food from the monkeys. They followed the monkeys to a small stream, which was fresh water. With water, many problems could be solved. With water, one could live. There were many cooking utensils on the ship. They could cook edible food on the island and survive. It was peaceful for a few days without any accidents. The murderer seemed to have calmed down, turned over a new leaf, and stopped killing. The vigilance in everyone's hearts also began to slowly relax, and a strange thought appeared in their minds. They were even a little grateful that the murderer had stopped. It was also good to wait for rescue calmly like this. When one person was killed, everyone was filled with righteous indignation. After several people died, they began to fear the murderer hiding in the dark. Now that the murderer had stopped, they also had a grateful heart. They were used to being abused, and this was how masochism came about. Ning Shu didn't think that the murderer would give up. The cruise ship lost its direction and came to this isolated island. It was obvious that the murderer wanted to kill all the people on the ship. Moreover, there was also a supernatural force that made the cruise ship lose its direction and come to this island. This supernatural force was lingering around them. Ning Shu had now set his eyes on the inhuman body. Instead of looking around, it was better to relax his vigilance and wait for that thing to appear. Ning Shu patted his chest. He was a little scared. He was afraid that it was a GUI. I like it. There was no trace at all. It was so interesting. And inexplicably, the people on the ship were killed. The first to die was a group of rich second generations, and then the ordinary people on the ship were killed. For lunch, everyone ate mushroom stewed meat soup. The taste was quite good and very fresh. Of course, they didn't dare to eat poisonous mushrooms. They were all identified. There were many cooks on the ship and they knew the ingredients. Therefore, the chances of eating poisonous mushrooms were not very high. With an abundance of resources and fresh water, there was no need to worry about food. Everyone's tense mood relaxed. However, they still had basic vigilance. Now that everyone was together at all times and no one acted alone, if the murderer wanted to do something, it was very likely that he would be exposed. Ning Shu sat on the beach and quietly looked at the calm sea. He Jia sat next to Ning Shu and handed Ning Shu a box of chocolates. Ning Shu opened it and ate the chocolates. Suddenly, he said, I don't know when there will be a storm. I'm afraid that this island will be flooded. He Jia's mouth twitched. Can't you hope for something better? You haven't been killed, but you hope to be drowned. What kind of woman was this? The more he looked at her, the more she didn't look like a model. Your temperament doesn't match your profession, He Jia said. Ning Shu stuffed a piece of chocolate into his mouth and chewed until his cheeks were full. He mumbled, You're not the same as those rich playboys. He Jia leaned back and looked at the beach. He sighed and said to Ning Shu, The sea is really beautiful. Ning Shu nodded. If I go crazy, it won't be beautiful. Ning Shu and He Jia turned to look at each other at the same time. Under the orange glow of the setting sun, their backs looked quiet and beautiful. He Jia laughed, revealing his white teeth. He didn't look like a rich playboy at all. Without the various social symbols, He Jia was just He Jia. He Jia asked, Why do you do this kind of work? When you go back, find another job and live a good life. Ning Shu didn't say anything. This job was done by Wan Li. For this kind of work, Ning Shu didn't have any discrimination or contempt. It existed for a reason. All things in the world, all people in the world, made up a colorful world. However, the soul suppressed in the body was always noisy, especially after she used too much spiritual power. The soul was very restless and always wanted to take back the body. Ning Shu touched his stomach and changed the topic. It's time for dinner. The two stood up from the beach. Ning Shu grabbed a handful of sand. The sand peeked out from between her fingers. She looked back at the vast sea. Under the red sun, the sea was sparkling and shining. It was really a beautiful sea. However, under this calm and beauty, who knew how many lives were swallowed? Chapter 40-23. If you have the ability to hurt people, if you have the ability to hide, if you have the ability to open the door, open, 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 Ning Shu's heart was screaming like a ghost. Since she didn't want to open the door, he could only break in. Ning Shu hit the barrier again and again. He condensed his consciousness into a needle and focused it on one spot. There was nothing he couldn't break. Ning Shu had business to do, so he didn't have time to enter Wan Li's body. As time passed, He Jia looked at Wan Li with more and more unfriendly eyes. He could tolerate her disappearing and appearing from time to time, but he couldn't allow her to not appear for so long. Wan Li, fuck your ancestors. In order to avoid being strangled again, Wan Li didn't get close to He Jia. She was inseparable from her colleagues and friends. Even if He Jia called her, Wan Li wouldn't go over. Everyone knew that you didn't have good intentions. I won't be your bodyguard or nanny. However, He Jia couldn't find trouble with Wan Li because he was not in good spirits recently. He didn't have much strength and was sleepy. His appetite had also become a little big. In short, his body was very uncomfortable. Most of the time, he slept in the tent and was not in good spirits. The captain had come over a few times to see if He Jia was sick. You don't have any strength. Do you have septicemia? Septicemia was a common illness at sea, but it wasn't that serious now. After all, everyone knew that it was because of insufficient vitamin intake. He just needed to eat a lemon every day. He was afraid that he had other diseases. There were doctors on the ship, but there wasn't much medicine. There were so many people, so the medicine had to be used sparingly. He Jia waved his hand weakly. It's nothing. I just don't have any strength. Maybe I'm scared. I'm afraid that the murderer will attack me. Captain, all right, if you say it's nothing, then it's nothing. Ning Shu knew very well why He Jia didn't have any strength and was mentally tired. It was because he needed strength to resist the external invasion. Although he might not know what was happening to his body needed strength. Therefore, he could only reduce the output of other forces to increase the resistance. Ning Shu felt a headache. He had no choice but to fight force with force. Hearing a cracking sound, he knew that the barrier had reached its limit. Then, there was the sound of glass shattering. Ning Shu entered a dark space. Inside the space, there was the murmuring of seawater and the cries of various underwater animals. Ning Shu felt something rubbing against its consciousness. It was slippery, so it must be some kind of fish. Of course, in this ocean, there were all kinds of flashing lights. They should be glowing jellyfish. He Jia had clearly entered his body, but why did it seem like he had entered another ocean? Ning Shu swam in the sea. From time to time, fish would bump into his body. There were even huge fishes swimming over their heads, blocking the light above the sea. Ning Shu. He originally thought that it would be fine as long as he entered his body, but he didn't expect it to be so vast inside. Moreover, he couldn't find that ball at all. Could it be that He Jia's body was connected to the ocean outside? This was another problem that gave him a headache. Is He Jia's body real? They tried their best to get in, but once they did, the problem was just as big. If they couldn't find that ball, what could they do? Ning Shu got out of He Jia's body. It was broad daylight, but He Jia had fallen into a deep sleep. Ning Shu entered Wan Li's body, walked into the tent, and woke He Jia up. He Jia opened his eyes in a daze. When he saw Ning Shu, he said weakly, "You're back." Ning Shu raised his eyebrows and asked, "Why do you look like this? Are you going to die?" He Jia said, "Without you by my side, I feel bored. Life is meaningless." Ning Shu. I really don't believe you. If she didn't know what was going on, she would have been touched by He Jie. He Jie said, I missed you so much that I didn't see you for a while. Look at my face. Don't I look haggard? Ning Shu stared at He Jie's face and said, fortunately, you've always been so ugly. He Jie curled his lips angrily. Am I still ugly? What are you thinking? He Jie struggled to sit up. I don't know what's going on. I feel a little uncomfortable. Wanli, I may die. He looked a little lonely and his eyes were full of loneliness, which was very different from usual. Ning Shu clicked his tongue. Don't worry. You won't die. Scourges live for 1,000 years. Everyone here will die, but you won't. Don't worry about it. He Jie looked at Ning Shu in confusion. Why? Why can't I die? Ning Shu looked at him with an unfathomable look. Don't you find that you're very special? He Jie said happily, am I different in your heart? Am I a special person? Ning Shu pressed He Jie's shoulder and scanned He Jie's body with his spiritual power. It was an ordinary human body. Why did it feel like a vast ocean? He Jie said, I'm hungry. I don't have any strength. Get me something to eat. Ning Shu was speechless. There are many fish in your body. Take them out and eat one. However, Ning Shu still went to find some food for He Jie. He made a bowl of porridge. After thinking about it, he sprinkled a little salt in it. The porridge was tasteless. As for the food, there was no food. He Jie was very flattered when he gave it to him. You made it for me yourself. Ning Shu nodded. Yes, it wasn't easy to make. It took a lot of effort. He Jie looked very touched. You're so good to me. Your other personality ran away when he saw me. Ning Shu chuckled. Anyone who was strangled would go around you. It was already very polite of him not to beat you up. You want me to serve you well? What are you thinking, idiot? He Jie drank the porridge. Ning Shu stared at him as if he could see a flower. He Jie asked, do you want to eat? Ning Shu shook his head. No, I'm thinking about something very important. He Jie asked casually, what is it? Ning Shu smiled. I'm thinking about how to see through you. How to understand you. He Jie finished the porridge and put it aside. He coughed, tidied up his clothes, and said seriously, my name is He Jie. My family is in the food and beverage industry. There are more than 1,000 chain stores in the country. Although I'm not favored at home, I still have money. Although I can't inherit the family business, I have dividends. I just take the money and don't do anything. In the future, we can travel anywhere we want. How comfortable is that? Let them work hard and we can play. It was a standard blind date self-introduction. Ning Shu was speechless. He Jie asked, what do you think of me? Chapter 40-24. He Jie used all his means and finally succeeded in lying on Ning Shu's back. Ning Shu didn't pity He Jie, but He Jie was lying on the ground, determined not to get up. Ning Shu couldn't be bothered to dawdle with him. She wanted to go back and rest. Ning Shu was carrying a 7-foot-tall man. It was really difficult. He Jie lay on Ning Shu's back and said gratefully, if it wasn't for you today, I'm afraid I'd be dead. I think this is a very strange matter. He Jie tried to find a topic. Oh, Ning Shu replied expressionlessly. What's so strange? It was really fucking heavy. He Jie was really crazy. Up there, it was really difficult for her. He Jie said agitatedly, don't you feel that something is wrong? Ning Shu said coldly, do you believe that I'll leave you here? He Jie said, I just took a bath. Why are there so many water plants around my feet? It's really strange. Ning Shu said, oh. He Jia was very dissatisfied with Ning Shu's calm tone. What do you mean, oh? I almost died just now, and in such a scary and strange way. Ning Shu was tired to death, but she still had to listen to He Jia. It was tiring. Back in the tent, she directly threw He Jia on the ground. He Jia grimaced in pain. Can you be gentler? It's good to know pain. You won't know anything when you're dead. Ning Shu tidied up her quilt and lay down to rest. He Jia was speechless. He shook Ning Shu awake. I'm in trouble and you're still so calm. I almost died. Ning Shu punched him. What can I do if I'm not calm? A few people died before, so it's normal for you to die. He Jia's eyes were full of pain. How can you be so cruel? I'm already like this, shut up. If you talk again, I'll knock you out. He Jia said, I'll say one last thing. I don't think the murderer is human. Ning Shu looked at him meaningfully. So that's how it is. Not human. Fuck, you're still looking at me like that? Do you think I'll kill myself? Did I eat too much? He Jia was so angry that he was dumbfounded. Did I wrap my feet in the seaweed? Ning Shu comforted him. Alright, I believe you. You won't kill yourself. Go to sleep. Even if you're not tired, I'm tired. He Jia stretched out his leg in front of Ning Shu. My leg hurts. Help me rub it. There's a bruise, so you have to rub it away. Ning Shu looked at He Jia's leg. Don't you have hands? Can't you rub it yourself? He Jia shook his head. No, I can't do it myself. You can do it for me. Ning Shu stretched out his hand and rubbed He Jia's leg. He Jia was in so much pain that He Jia wailed like a ghost. Be gentle, be gentle. I'm injured again. Ning Shu did not stop and said, of course I have to use more strength. Otherwise, how can I rub the bruise away? Forget it, I won't rub it anymore. He Jia admitted defeat. Ning Shu smiled and said, don't be like that. You're almost done. You can't give up halfway. He Jia's wailing woke many people up. Many people shouted in dissatisfaction. If you want to do it, then do it. Why are you making such a big noise? Do you still want people to sleep? What are you doing? He Jia said, others misunderstood. Quickly let go of my leg. You're a man. Can't you endure this little bit? Shut up. He Jia had just taken a shower. Now that he was sweating from the pain, the shower was in vain. He Jia wanted to ask Ning Shu to get a wet handkerchief for him to wipe his body. But when he saw the expressionless Ning Shu, he swallowed his words. Forget it, bear with it. In the middle of the night, Ning Shu heard He Jia's ravings. Ning Shu looked and saw He Jia sweating profusely. It was as if he had a nightmare. He wiped his forehead and it was boiling hot. He had a fever. Ning Shu went out of the tent and found the captain. He asked him for some fever medicine and gave it to He Jia. Ning Shu still had to wipe his sweat. Sigh, what a tiring life. He also had to give him some water from time to time to replenish his water. After taking the medicine, He Jia slept better. When he woke up, it was already noon the next day. Ning Shu brought a bowl of porridge. Eat. He Jia was weak. Am I sick? You are the one taking care of me. Thank you. Ning Shu nodded. I didn't sleep the whole night. Let me sleep for a while. He Jia nodded and looked at Ning Shu with a gentle gaze. Go ahead and sleep. I feel much better. Ning Shu looked at him with disdain. Don't look at me with such a mushy gaze. I'm going to throw up. He Jia, Ning Shu lay down with his back facing He Jia. His expression instantly turned cold. He glanced at He Jia and scoffed. Sometimes, watching a show is fun. I'll play with you. When he woke up, He Jia was putting ointment on his ankle. You're awake. Ning Shu ate some food and asked, no one died today, right? He Jia, no, I probably died. But since I didn't, everything is fine. Ning Shu, the Grim Reaper is here. It's just a matter of time. He Jia said angrily, can't you hope for something good for me? The sky was dark. The captain looked at the sky and didn't look too good. Even people who didn't know about the weather knew that it was going to rain when they saw the dark clouds gathering above the sea. Once it rained, it meant a storm. The tide would rise and the beach would be uninhabitable. They had to protect the supplies. The worst thing was that it seemed like it was going to rain at night. It was dark and rainy. The danger was self-evident. This was going to be a tough night. Now that it was still early, they packed up and went to the forest to go higher. Everyone was packing up. At this time, He Jia was a big burden. His leg was swollen. Ning Shu had to pack up and carry He Jia on his back. If they couldn't take it with one trip, Ning Shu would have to make a second trip. There were many dangers in the forest. They had to be careful at all times. When can we leave here? Why hasn't anyone come to save us yet? Some of the girls with weaker mental fortitude cried. Ning Shu said to the captain, we don't have to go to the forest. Let's get on the ship. The ship hasn't left yet. It should be fine. It was better to stop around the island and take some safety measures. It was safer than staying in the forest. Yes, let's go to the ship. We don't want to be in the rain. Let's go to the ship. He Jia suddenly thought of something. Why didn't we stay on the ship before? Why did we have to stay on the beach? Everyone's IQ was probably not online. They were just following the crowd. Ning Shu said, the beach is comfortable. It's too wasteful to stay on the ship. So everyone started to go to the ship again. Ning Shu looked at He Jia. He Jia smiled at Ning Shu. Ha, I'll have to trouble you to carry me. Are you fucking growing on my back? Chapter 40-25. Everyone went back to the ship and returned to their rooms. After running back and forth a few times, the sky had already darkened. They looked at their watches and saw that it was only 4 o'clock, but it felt like the sky was already dark. On the phone. The dark clouds were already very low in the sky. Ning Shu carried He Jia onto the ship and kicked the door open. He Jia's eyelids twitched. How could he kick the door while carrying him? What kind of strange strength was that? Walking into the room, Ning Shu threw He Jia onto the bed. He Jia bounced twice on the bouncy bed and hissed, can you be more gentle? Girls can't be so rough. Ning Shu said directly, so annoying. Who said that women should be gentle and understanding? Women can be rude, but you men can be pushy too. He Jia was speechless. Ning Shu got off the ship to move things again. How could she suffer? She had to charge 5 times the salary of a bodyguard and a nanny. There was a rumbling sound and lightning flashed in the dark clouds. The sea breeze blew and the waves came in waves, bringing with them the strong smell of the sea. The cruise ship shook slightly, but not very much. It hadn't started yet, so he hoped that the cruise ship would be fine in the storm. Boom! A loud thunderclap exploded in their ears, and then, bean-sized raindrops fell down with a pitter-patter. He Jia got off the bed and was about to open the door with one leg. It was raining and his bodyguard wasn't back yet. Just as he was about to open the door, it opened with a click and a person walked in. Ning Shu brushed away the hair stuck to his face and complained, this rain is too heavy. Ning Shu looked at He Jia. Why are you getting off the bed? Hurry up. I don't want to carry you anymore. You're too heavy and you smell like sweat. He Jia said. This is the smell of a man. Ning Shu snorted. You men like to lie to yourselves. You can say that the smell of sweat is the smell of a man, but in reality, it's disgusting. It's oily and disgusting. Jie was speechless. He couldn't help but say, "Aren't you serving stinky men? Do you think they're stinky?" Ning Shu said, "Of course I do. After all, the customer is God. Can we say that the customer is stinky?" Jie. How shameless. Ning Shu took a shower and dried his hair. Through the window, he looked at the situation outside. It was already very dark outside, the tide was surging, and the sound of raindrops was very loud. As the tide surged, the cruise ship swayed more and more violently. Fortunately, it was near the beach, so it was relatively shallow. If the ship sailed in the sea, it was very likely to capsize. The rumbling thunder sounded like it was hitting the top of the boat. Ning Shu pulled out a piece of paper and stuffed it into her ears. The thunder was too loud. Every time the thunder exploded, her heart would beat violently. Looking out of the window, it was as if the end of the world had arrived. He could not help but feel fear in his heart. Jie followed suit. Seeing how calm Ning Shu was, he asked, "Aren't you afraid?" Ning Shu smirked. "Of course I'm scared. I don't even dare to look outside." Jie, "You don't look scared at all, okay?" It was getting harder and harder to see through this woman. Dong, dong, dong. The sound of knocking was mixed in with the thunder. It could only be heard when the thunder stopped. Ning Shu was sleeping comfortably on the sofa with his ears stuffed. Jie jumped over with one leg and woke Ning Shu up. "Wake up, did you hear the sound of knocking on the door?" Ning Shu opened his eyes and said coldly, "Before you are killed by that mysterious murderer, I will kill you first." "Did you hear that? Someone is knocking on the door," Jie said. Ning Shu took off his earplugs and went to open the door. There was a group of girls outside. When they saw Ning Shu open the door, they immediately said, "We are too scared, so we can only come to find you." The crackling sound of thunder struck fear into people's hearts. The girls could not go find a man or a woman. At this time, it was very likely that they would be taken advantage of. They did not want to see the faces of those stinky men. At this time, Ning Shu was the first choice of these girls. As for Jie, who was he? Did they need to care about him? The girls filed in, and soon, the spacious room became crowded. Everyone knew that they could not sleep. Some of them even brought blankets to spread on the ground. Jie was very annoyed. Did these girls know that the owner of this room was him? Without his permission, they came in one by one. Ning Shu did not drive these girls away because they brought some snacks over. Ning Shu ate very happily. When there were more people, the room would become dirty and messy. Jie was lying on the bed alone. No one came to disturb him. But the chatter over there made Jie very unbearable. "Can you guys be a little closer? Running into someone else's room without the owner's permission, can you have a little bit of civility?" The girls quieted down a little and then began to chatter again. Jie was already in despair and was too lazy to say anything. The storm outside made the ship shake even more. Some people who were seasick began to act up. Clang, 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 the rain became heavier and heavier. The shaking made people feel insecure. Ning Shu was squeezed in the middle. "Why is my life so hard? Can't I have a good rest?" Ning Shu took out a mirror and looked at himself. He was even more haggard. Originally, this body's skin was not good. The pores were very big. During this period of time, Ning Shu did not care about his appearance. He also did not pay attention to maintenance and sunscreen. Being blown by the sea breeze, he was even worse. However, now even food and clothing were a problem. Who cared about the health of the skin? The cruise ship shook violently as if it would capsize in the next second. But gradually, some people could not endure it and fell asleep. Ning Shu also fell asleep. He did not know how long he slept. When he woke up, he was very hungry. The weather had cleared up. The sea was quiet. Under the sunlight, the waves reflected a bright and beautiful luster. The seagulls were singing. What a beautiful scenery of the sea. It was as if the storm yesterday did not happen. It was another beautiful day. After enduring a stormy night, he avoided a crisis. Ning Shu went out of the room to the dining room. He found that there was no one eating in the dining room. Instead, they were crowding around the kitchen door. Ning Shu was quite calm. There was no breakfast. It seemed that something had happened. Maybe it was a cook. Ning Shu squeezed in. When he saw the victim's death, it was a bit too horrible to look at. There was a fruit knife in the neck. Blood splattered on the table. The blood had already solidified. Obviously, he had been dead for a while. The captain checked and found that it was a young master. He wondered, why did he come to the kitchen with a knife? Did he have some kind of disease? She guessed that he must have stabbed himself with the knife when the boat rocked last night. Genius website address. Mobile version of reading website. The Canon Fodder female supporting character counterattack. The Canon Fodder female supporting character counterattack. Chapter 40-26. Inside a bubble, that's right. Dong Lan popped the bubble and blew out more bubbles, enveloping Ning Shu and the others. Ning Shu felt that this girl was really adorable. As for Dong Lan, it transformed into a blue creature with legs and wings. It was hard to tell if it had wings or webbed wings. It looked like a fire-breathing lizard covered in scales. The scales were huge, about the size of a palm. They were colorful and looked messy. The more one looked at it, the more uncomfortable it felt. Dong Lan jumped into the water with the bubbles behind her. The people in the bubbles were completely powerless. They couldn't control the direction of the bubbles and could only go with the flow. On land, the Donglan Sea looked red, but when one entered the water, the color was clear. However, it was indeed corrosive. The bubbles were slowly looked down upon in the water. There were all kinds of creatures in the Donglan Sea, and they all looked strange. The only thing they had in common was that they all had thick fish scales to resist the corrosion of the Donglan Sea. The defensive power of these fish scales should be very strong. The divine stone race had high defensive power, but they didn't dare to touch the corrosive Styx River. Occasionally, some creatures would pass by, and the water they brought with them would cause the bubbles to sway. The world and the bubbles spun so fast that they were about to vomit. They didn't feel good. Dong Lan swam over and pushed the bubbles. "Don't worry, we'll be there soon." As she spoke, she spat out a string of bubbles. Ning Shu couldn't help but ask, "Your bodies are covered in scales, but your insides aren't. Won't you be corroded after drinking Dong Lan's water? Could the insides of the body be stronger than the outside?" Dong Lan's fish form didn't look good. This should be her battle form. Her body was streamlined, allowing her to swim freely in the water. The scales clung tightly to his body, densely packed, without any gaps. Donglan answered Ning Shu's question. "No, the races in the Donglan Sea have internal structures to deal with the corrosive seawater." Ning Shu nodded. She evolved to have such an ability. "We're here." Donglan cheered happily, then pushed the bubble towards a barrier. After a series of clangs, the scenery in front of everyone changed. This was a very bustling street. There were many people walking on the street, but the houses were very gorgeous. At the end of the street, there was a huge and magnificent crystal palace. Ning Shu exclaimed, "Am I in the Crystal Dragon Palace?" "What Crystal Dragon Sky?" "No, this is our clan's land. Our clansmen all live here." Dong Lan turned into her human form and popped the bubble. There was no seawater inside the enchantment. Ning Shu stepped on the floor, which was no different from stepping on a road. Ning Shu asked, "In that case, your race is very powerful in the East Orchid Sea, right? It took a lot of manpower and resources to create such a clan land." This was a symbol of strength and manpower. Dong Lanhai shook his head. "I don't think so. The Dong Lanhai Sea is huge, and we have grudges with many races in the Dong Lanhai Sea. We are also the targets of some races. We need a clan like this to protect ourselves," Ning Shu said. "The East Orchid Sea is really chaotic." Dong Lan brought Ning Shu to the largest crystal palace. Along the way, many clansmen greeted Dong Lan. They seemed to respect Dong Lan. Ning Shu asked curiously, "When a race is born, is there a division of work?" Dong Lan could barely understand Ning Shu's words. "Probably. A race needs leaders and warriors. Some are leaders, and some are warriors. It is decided when a race is born. I am a leader. In the future, I will lead my race. However, I am still a child. The leader is someone else." Ning Shu was even more curious. "How were you born? Why are the others already adults, but you are still a child?" "Even if it is a race, the growth of each individual is different," Dong Lan said. "Why are you asking me so many questions? What is your race like?" Dong Lan asked. Ning Shu said, "I am the only one in my race. Not only me, but all four of us are generals without an army." Dong Lan's expression became somewhat pitiful. In this void where one needed to stick together to survive, having fewer clansmen meant having less power. The chances of survival were much lower. No wonder the four of them had to stick together. Without clansmen, they could only choose living beings without clansmen. "It's okay. There will be more and more of your clansmen." Dong Lan comforted them. Ning Shu. "Thank you." Although he felt that he did not need to be comforted. The lack of leaders meant that the leader's identity was unique. Whether it was a race or a group, they all needed a leader. Otherwise, a race would be like a sheet of loose sand. Even if they had power, they would not be able to use it. It was natural for the leader to live in the largest crystal dragon palace. As they walked closer, the crystal palace looked even more majestic. At least, they had never seen such an exquisite building on land. Suddenly, they felt that Dong Lan was a second-generation rich kid. Dong Lan brought Ning Shu into the crystal palace and brought them to meet the elders. There were some people sitting in the palace. Some of them had blue skin as if they were painted. Even in their human form, their muscles were bulging and they were extremely burly. There were also some who were gentle and polite. It looked like there was a clear division of labor. "Dong Lan, you're back. Why did you bring outsiders into the race?" The man sitting on the main seat looked at Dong Lan. Although his tone was strict, he did not scold her. Dong Lan said, "Don't worry. They are not living beings from the Dong Lan Sea. They are from the land. They are good friends I met in the cub world. I brought them over to meet them." In order to prove that they were harmless, Dong Lan revealed almost everything about Ning Shu and the other three. They have no clansmen. There will be no conflicts between races. The muscular man rubbed his bald head and looked at Ning Shu and the other three. He clicked his tongue. "They are all cubs. Do they want to join our race?" "Uncle Li, they are my friends. They are not joining our race." Dong Lan shook her head. The muscular man called Uncle Li nodded. Then, he asked, "What kind of racial talents do you have?" Ning Shu shook his head and said, "I don't have any racial talents. I was born weak. I have to cough 3 times every 2 steps. I don't even know if I can grow up healthily." Ning Shu almost cried. "Anyway, I am very desperate. I am worried and terrified. Everyone, They did not express any opinions. Ning Shu pulled Jin Ji out again. He only knows how to eat. Besides eating, he just eats. He has no strength. The Canon Fodder Female Supporting Character Counterattack. The Canon Fodder Female Supporting Character Counterattack. Chapter 40-27. She floated in this world with her consciousness and was trapped in this body. There were restrictions. If she was conscious, she could go anywhere. Therefore, she had to find a time to leave this body. The murderer used supernatural power to kill people, and she had to use supernatural power to find out. Ning Shu packed up the things. He Jia handed him a piece of paper. Wipe it. When my leg is better, you don't have to do this. Ning Shu had been reducing the power that suppressed the soul all day long. The soul of the original owner was making a lot of noise in the body. He Jia had been trying to talk to Ning Shu, but Ning Shu just responded with a few words. He Jia frowned and asked, "What's wrong with you?" Ning Shu said, "I'm thinking about who the murderer is and how he killed people. Only when we find the murderer can we be safe." "You're right. We have to save ourselves. It's too dangerous to wait passively. It's useless for you to worry about it alone. We have to work together. But there are so many people. There's no way to command them. Everyone has their own ideas. It's useless for you to worry. Now the murderer's target is us, the rich second generation. You seem to be safer." Ning Shu said, "And the cook? The cook should be an accident. He drowned by accident. You see, so many people died. He was the only ordinary person. The others were all rich second generation like us." He Jia said, "The murderer must hate the rich." In the dead of night, He Jia's breathing was steady and deep. It seemed that he was sleeping soundly. Ning Shu released the power that suppressed the soul. The soul of the original owner immediately began to fight back and took the initiative of the body. Ning Shu's consciousness floated out of the body, like a gust of wind drifting everywhere. Wanli, who had taken over the body, sat up immediately and breathed heavily. She looked at herself sleeping in the tent. There was a person lying next to her. It was a man. She looked a little confused. It was very dark in the tent. She couldn't see the man's face clearly. He Jia's voice was very lazy. "You're awake. Do you want to go to the toilet?" Wan Li's eyelids twitched. When did she hook up with this rich second generation? Why was he not in the room on the cruise ship? "I'm not going to the toilet." Wan Li lay down. For a period of time, her body was completely out of her control. Moreover, she seemed to be in a pitch-black space. There was nothing around her, and there was no sound. Now that he had regained control of his body, he could see the light again. Ning Shu was like the wind, calmly looking down from above the beach. He didn't believe that he still couldn't find the culprit. No one would guard against a gust of wind, against something that could not be seen. After observing for an entire night, Ning Shu did not gain anything. However, without his body, Ning Shu could go anywhere he wanted. He could spy on anyone, go to the deep sea, or even leave this place and float to the human port city. However, she was only a consciousness now, so it might be a little problematic for her to communicate with others. If she ran over and whispered into someone's ear for no reason, she might scare them out of their wits. Even if someone were to come and rescue her, the problem was that the murderer had not been found. The murder would continue, and it did not matter where it was. On the contrary, it was better to concentrate on the islands. After a night, Wanli woke up quietly. She didn't know what had happened to her during this period of time, so she could only observe slowly. He Jia also woke up and said to Wanli, "Help me get something to eat later. I'm so hungry. When my leg is better, I'll take care of you." Although Wanli had nothing to do with him, she still nodded and said, "Okay." He Jia looked at her and asked, "How did your attitude become so good?" Usually, she didn't treat him with respect. If he asked her to do something, she would definitely roll her eyes. Wanli carefully observed He Jia's expression. Observing people's expressions was a compulsory course in their line of work. If they couldn't even detect the mood of the guest, they would definitely anger the guest. Seeing that He Jia didn't seem angry, Wanli followed his words and said, "What's wrong? Is it not good for my attitude to be better to you?" He Jia frowned, and a puzzled expression flashed across his face. He said, "Of course it's good, but it makes me a little scared. You've always suspected that I'm the murderer." "Murderer?" Wanli stayed calm and went out to get food for He Jia. Because the food was getting less and less, breakfast was very simple, with porridge and a small fish. He Jia was so hungry that he wolfed down the food. When he saw Wanli eating indifferently, he asked, "Don't you want to eat? You're pregnant now. You need to eat more." Wanli touched her belly for the first time. Pregnant? How could it be possible? She had been on the ship for less than a month. How could she be pregnant? So it must be fake. Wanli's first thought was that she didn't know what was going on at this time. She used pregnancy to tie this man up. Was she going to marry into a rich family? But who was so stupid? In such a short time, how could he know that she was pregnant? It was impossible for the rich second generation to admit it. Wanli had a headache, but she still responded to changes by sticking to the status quo and taking one step at a time. He Jia said, "When we go back, I'll take good care of you." Wanli was shocked. This rich second generation really intended to be a fool. But the problem was, where could she find a child? What kind of stupid method was this? It was so easy to marry into a rich family. On the contrary, it would annoy the rich second generation. These rich second generation were generous. They spent money to play for fun. But if they were cheated, they would definitely be punished. Wanli tidied up the leftovers and tidied up the surroundings. "Why did you suddenly become so virtuous?" He Jia said, "Usually, when I ask you to do something, you're too lazy to do it." A gust of wind blew past He Jia's face. He Jia felt itchy on his face and couldn't help but touch it. Ning Shu snorted. She was so lazy. Wanli was a little impatient. She learned about what happened during this time. It seemed that many rich second generation were killed. In this case, everyone was equal. "I found that you're very talkative. I'm lazy and you have a problem with me. I'm diligent and you have a problem with me." She was too lazy to serve him. He Jia finally felt that she was a little more normal. He was used to being treated with sarcasm. Wanli was speechless. It seemed that this rich second generation was a masochist. Wanli relaxed a lot. Who would want to please someone all the time? Now there was a problem. She wasn't pregnant. This matter must be explained clearly. Otherwise, there would be no way to explain it later. Wanli said, "I was joking before. I'm not pregnant." He Jia said, "I know. I just like to play with you." He didn't care. If you say you're pregnant, then so be it. Life on the island is too hard. It's good to entertain yourself. Chapter 40-28. Gift? Ning Shu and Fa Tian looked at each other, both seeing the ominous look in each other's eyes. According to Dong Lan's taste, she didn't know what to give if she thought it was a good gift but others didn't. Of course, even so, Ning Shu didn't regret coming here. It could be said that he understood a race. Other than the divine stone race, all the other races stayed as far away from them as possible. Now, it was time to get in touch with other races. Because of Dong Lan's help, this race didn't do anything to them and didn't drive them away. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, endless fantasy translation. If they barged into another race's territory like this, they would definitely be driven away and cause a race war. Do we really have to give it to them? The clansman doubted Dong Lan. Dong Lan said with certainty, of course, we have to give it to them. The clansman had no choice but to take the gift. Dong Lan happily said to Fa Tian, you will definitely be satisfied with the gift I give you. Really, it's very precious. Fa Tian's mouth twitched. Since it's so precious, then forget it. We don't need any gifts. Dong Lan directly said, how can that be? It's your first time here. How can I not give you something special? Fa Tian, you're too polite. This is the etiquette of our race. It means that we welcome you. Don't refuse. If you refuse, I'll be sad. Fa Tian, we're friends, right? Fa Tian, maybe. Maybe. However, Dong Lan didn't mind. After all, she understood Fa Tian. When he was young, Fa Tian was much more direct than now. Now, he was much more reserved. When he was young, he would directly tell people to scram. Fa Tian, what do you think of our race? Dong Lan asked Fa Tian. As for Ning Shu, Jin Ji, and Origin King, they were more or less just background characters. Fa Tian was silent for a moment before saying, it's very strong and very standardized. The division of labor was clear. If there really was an enemy attack, this race would come up with countermeasures as soon as possible. The subordinates followed the example of their superiors. Then, Fa Tian, do you want to form an alliance with our race? Dong Lan asked again. Fa Tian furrowed his brows. Before he could reply, the Eastern Blue clansman brought over a large clamshell. The clamshell was opened to reveal something wet inside. It looked like an eyeball, and there were traces of blood on it. Ning Shu. These are the eyes of the bottom shell race. The bottom shell race is very difficult to kill. Furthermore, their eyes possess very powerful powers. East Blue handed over a few eyeballs. Ning Shu used his hand to touch his eyeballs. There was no need to mention the feeling of touch. All the hair on his body stood up. Ning Shu didn't know if it was an illusion, but he felt that the pupils in his eyeballs even moved a little and stared straight at him. This thing was causing discomfort. Other than Jin Ji, who looked curiously at the eyeballs, everyone else's expression was a little indescribable. East Blue was indeed a cute and naive mushroom, but this naivety did not include a benevolent heart towards all races. It was just like how a human child would boil an ant's nest with boiling water and eat fried chicken legs. They would not pity the chicken that had turned into fried chicken. Ning Shu asked, how should we use the power in the eyeballs? It couldn't be what she was thinking, right? This was too challenging. Dong Lan grabbed an eyeball and threw it directly into her mouth. It was as if she was chewing on a small tomato. Gray liquid could even be seen splashing out of the eyeball. Ning Shu couldn't help but close his eyes. He couldn't bear to look. He couldn't bear to look. Dong Lan swallowed the eyeball and said, after eating this race, our eyes will become brighter and our vision will be better. The dining table was silent. Ning Shu wanted to say that eating something to nourish one's body was really pseudoscience. It was unscientific and useless. Dong Lan said, you guys eat. Ning Shu shook his head and said firmly, no, I'm not eating. Since this is a gift from you, of course, we have to keep it well. I really don't have the courage to eat it. I'm scared. Then you can keep it, but you still have to eat it early. After a long time, the energy in the eyes will disappear. Dong Lan didn't force him. When Animal Jin Ji heard that it was edible, he stuffed it into his mouth without thinking. As soon as he chewed, the people at the table could hear the sound of juice bursting. When he thought that it was an eyeball, he couldn't keep smiling. Dong Lan, have you guys finished eating? The clansman who walked in asked Dong Lan. Dong Lan nodded. Yes. Then. The clansman's eyes stopped on Fa Tian. He said to him, please go to the main hall. We have something to discuss with you. Dong Lan stood up. I'll go with you. Ning Shu and Su Wang also stood up. The clansman said, I didn't call you for the time being. Wait a while. I'm looking for him. Ning Shu didn't insist on following. He said to Fa Tian, you go. Then he lowered his voice. Be careful. Anyway, she could use her spiritual force, so it didn't matter if she went or not. Dong Lan said to the people who stayed behind, there's a lot of food here. You can try it. Then she followed Fa Tian out of the dining hall. Su Wang sat down angrily. This is too direct. Isn't it just because we're not strong enough that they treat us differently? Here, only Fa Tian's birth and strength were worthy of this race's attention. The others were all old, weak, sick, and disabled. The void was a place where the strong were respected. Su Wang felt that he had been neglected. Ning Shu didn't care about these details. Fa Tian was on their side, and Fa Tian's glory was their glory. Rounding it up, it was equivalent to them being invited. There was no problem with Dong Lan's hospitality. Jin Ji fell in love with the juicy eyeball and ate all the eyeballs in front of him. Ning Shu gave his share to Jin Ji. If he liked it, he could eat more. His spiritual force followed Fa Tian. Under the guidance of the clansmen, Fa Tian and Dong Lan came to an even larger and more solemn palace. The decorations were very luxurious, and the decorative materials were all from the Dong Lan Sea. Using local materials to decorate the residence beautifully showed that this race had a very high sense of aesthetics. In short, this was a powerful race. Fa Tian entered the palace quietly. Since Dong Lan invited them to the Dong Lan Sea, there had been various preludes, and now it was the critical moment. The same people were in the palace. The man sitting on the main seat asked, "What's your name?" Fa Tian, Fa Tian. Fa Tian, what do you think of our race? When Fa Tian came here, this was the sentence he heard the most. What about your race? Do you want to hear others praise your race? You're showing off, right? Fa Tian said truthfully, very powerful. Then, do you want to join our race? The bald man asked. Chapter 40-29. As soon as he said this, the atmosphere in the hall became heavy. Everyone stared at heaven, waiting for heaven's answer. Dong Lan exclaimed, "Why do you want Fa Tian to join our race? We can form an alliance." When Dong Lan invited Fa Tian, she wanted to form an alliance. That way, everyone would be friends. That way, when she went to play with Fa Tian, he wouldn't be so impatient. Fa Tian's attitude was cold, and he didn't even acknowledge her. But Dong Lan felt that playing with Fa Tian was more interesting than playing with the cubs in the cub shelter. The main reason was that she was bored of the cub shelter. Dong Lan wanted to run around the void with Fa Tian. After Fa Tian left the cub shelter, Dong Lan's strength had been steadily increasing. She could go play around in the void. Dong Lan admitted that she did not have good intentions. However, she did it because she wanted to stay by Facian's side to have fun. But her clansmen wanted Fa Tian to join their race. This request was too much. Fa Tian said, "Do I qualify to join your race? You're a Khanate cardinal treasure and have no clansmen. We can make an exception and let you join. If you join our race, you'll partner with Dong Lan. Your true form is a whip. You need someone to use it, right? If you partner with Dong Lan, she'll be the future leader of our race, and you'll be the leader too. Whether our race can survive or not depends on you." Becoming the leader of a race was a very tempting promise. In the restaurant, Ning Shu looked at the old, weak, sick, and disabled beside him. Compared to this race, they really couldn't compare. He didn't realize it before, but now he realized that their team was really weird. Dong Lan listened to her clansman's analysis and felt better. This way, she could be with Fa Tian all the time. Wherever he wanted to go, she could follow Fa Tian. She looked at Fa Tian and asked, "What do you think? Do you want to partner with me? Don't worry. If you join our race, no one will bully you. Bullying you is bullying me." Fa Tian thought for a moment and said, "I really want to join your race." The atmosphere relaxed a little, and Dong Lan's azure blue eyes became even brighter, bursting with intense joy. "However, there is a problem that I feel the need to clarify. Otherwise, I would be lying to you. Since you have sincerely invited me to join your race, I can't lie to you." Everyone frowned. Even Ning Shu was puzzled. What did Fa Tian have that he didn't know? Was he trying to coax her or was he serious? If you have something to say, just say it. Honesty is the most important part of cooperation, the man on the main seat said. Fa Tian let out a breath and said, "First, my bone structure is not good. My leg was cut off by someone. Although my leg is healed now, my growth limit has been fixed. East Blue will get stronger and stronger, but I will not make any progress. My existence will become more and more useless to East Blue." Dong Lan immediately said, "I don't care about this, really." Fadian then said, "Second, the person who cut off my leg is Granduncle. I have a grudge against Granduncle. If we meet, Granduncle will kill me. Dong Lan is with me, so she will be dragged down by me." Dong Lan expressed her position again. "I'm not afraid of being implicated." Everyone present was silent for a moment. Not only will it implicate East Blue, but it will also implicate the entire race. The man on the main seat asked, "Is the Granduncle that Granduncle? The Granduncle that uses weak souls?" Fa Tian nodded. "Yes, that Granduncle. I'm at death's door, hiding from him like a mouse. As long as I appear in front of him, I will die. If he knows that you are hiding me, will he come knocking on your door?" Ning Shu was speechless. Even Ning Shu was stunned by Fa Tian's words. He didn't know if the Granduncle would come knocking on their door, but he knew that the Granduncle wouldn't be so free. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation. But looking at this race, it seemed that they believed it. The Granduncle was really infamous. Everyone who lived in the sea had heard of his name. Just tell me, is there any place in this void that you haven't been to and haven't created? Originally, they wanted Fa Tian to join their race and find a weapon for their future leader. Fa Tian, who had no race, was the best choice. They didn't expect him to carry so many things. The most important thing was that his potential wasn't enough. If his potential was good, they would have accepted him even if it meant offending the Granduncle. What they saw was nothing more than potential. He didn't even have the most basic capital. Dong Lan said to the man on the main seat, "I don't believe that he will bring people to the Dong Lan Sea to attack us. I don't think this matter is that serious." Dong Lan's thinking was very simple. They felt that Fa Tian was worth recruiting. Moreover, the Granduncle wouldn't come looking for trouble with them because of a Fa Tian with no potential. Since his potential wasn't good, why would the Granduncle chase after him? Was it worth it? However, the others thought more. For the entire race, they couldn't do anything too risky. They weren't sure if the Granduncle would come looking for trouble because of Fa Tian, but they couldn't bring unnecessary trouble to their race because of Fa Tian. The Granduncle might come, or he might not. There was no need to make such a gamble. The leader on the main seat said, "Thank you for telling us the truth. In this case, our race is indeed not suitable for you. However, you are still a friend of our race." Fa Tian said gratefully, "Thank you." Dong Lan stomped her feet. "You are all cowards. Why are you so afraid of the Granduncle? Even if he comes, the Donglan Sea is our home ground. Donglan, we already have many enemies in the sea, the leader said in a low voice. There is no need to add enemies on land. Donglan bit her lip. Out of respect and obedience to the leader, she didn't refute, but she felt sullen. She pulled Fatian out of the palace. She looked at Fatian and said, although our race can't recruit you, we are still friends. Of course, Fatian said coldly. However, we shouldn't interact too much. I don't want to implicate you. I am me, and our race is our race, Donglan said. Let me send you off. I originally wanted to form an alliance with you. That way, we would be friends. However, my race wanted to recruit you into our race, which disrupted my plan. Back at the restaurant, Ning Shu looked at Fatian. Fatian gave Ning Shu a reassuring look. After packing up, Donglan blew a big bubble and led them out of the beautiful Crystal Palace. In the bubble, they saw the Crystal Palace getting further and further away, smaller and smaller. Finally, it disappeared. This was a pretty good trip. When they got ashore, Donglan popped the bubble and asked, "Where are you going next? Can I go with you? I don't want to go back to the Cubs." Chapter 40-30. Afraid that they wouldn't agree, Donglan quickly proved her strength. I'm already very strong. I definitely won't be a burden. Fatian refused. The place we're going to is very dangerous. Donglan became even more excited. Since it's so dangerous, we need help. I have many life-saving items on me. The more people we have, the safer we'll be. This guy was like a dogskin plaster, the kind that couldn't be shaken off. Fatian said, your people won't let you come with us. When the time comes, your people will blame me. Since we're friends, you don't want me to be blamed by your people, right? Donglan said, I naturally don't want that. However, she couldn't refute Fatian. She could only watch as Fatian left. She felt very wronged. Her eyes were watery. He still said that they were friends, but he didn't treat her as a friend at all. Liar. Donglan turned around and left in the opposite direction. Her back looked very lonely. Ning Shu said to Fatian, this girl isn't that annoying. She probably likes you and wants to be by your side. When she grows up, she will become the leader of her race. It's normal for her to want to live a happy life when she's young. Fatian said, hee, she wants to find a playmate. I don't have time to deal with her. Ning Shu nodded. That's true. I don't want to see you humbly coaxing others to play with. Even though Fatian had experienced many things, he was still very proud. It was too difficult for him to follow a girl around all day just to make her happy. Ning Shu was more concerned about another matter. You said that your broken leg affected you greatly. Did it really affect your growth? Fatian said, didn't you hear? I said it on purpose. If I said that I was very powerful, so powerful that I was invincible, then we wouldn't be able to leave Donglan Sea. This race isn't simple. It's better not to provoke them. Ning Shu, hey, you mischievous girl, I'm really asking you. You can't possibly lie to me, right? You spoiled things and broke your leg. Did it really not affect you? I want to hear the truth. There's definitely an impact, but it's not that big. After all, there's naturally a difference between the original one and the one that grew later, Fatian said nonchalantly. Ning Shu replied with an oh and asked suspiciously, really? Why do I find it hard to believe? Fatian stretched out his hand and flicked Ning Shu's forehead. He used a lot of strength, and a small bump immediately appeared on Ning Shu's forehead. He almost had a concussion. Ning Shu immediately called back, why don't you try hitting me again? He died just because he tried? Fatian asked. Ning Shu, you can try. Don't make wild guesses. My situation isn't that bad. It's not that I spoiled things. It's just that I lacked energy before, so I didn't grow. Now that I have enough energy, I've grown, Fatian said. Do you know how long it's been since I was killed by senior uncle and reborn? I haven't grown at all. Fatian explained. Ning Shu, but that Donglan hasn't grown at all. Did you accelerate the growth? Different races have different growth cycles. I'm a weapon, so my growth cycle is different. Stop making wild guesses. If I don't say something serious, you'll snatch people from Donglan. Snatch people from an entire race. Fatian raised his hand. I can't wait to flick your head. Ning Shu hugged his head. You're so perverted. His heart relaxed a little. Fatian was too tense. He always wanted to take revenge and end things. However, things weren't so easy to end. Senior uncle wasn't as easy to kill as a chicken or a pig. He just had to raise his hand and cut it down. In turn, he might be killed by senior uncle. When the Origin King learned that Fatian was going to be recruited and become a leader in the future, he asked in confusion, why don't you agree? If he became a leader, he would be able to lead an entire race. This race would be the foundation of the void. Unfortunately, no race wanted to recruit him. Ning Shu said with a smile, see, there are many people who are willing to be a son-in-law, but you don't want to. They just want help and don't want to take any risks. I've never seen anyone do business like this. They want me to be used by them, but they don't want to take any risks. I don't want to do business with such people. Fatian curled his lips. Even if he spent money to buy something, he might not be satisfied with the product. Even if he spent money, he wouldn't feel comfortable, let alone when both sides were cooperating. Although the Origin King felt that it was a pity, he couldn't control this kind of thing and couldn't make decisions for Fatian. The Origin King said, I have something to do in the abyss. Ning Shu asked, do you want us to accompany you? The Origin King's family was in the abyss, so he wanted to go and see it. The entire energy tree was already very spectacular, and there was also a spring full of vitality. The spring was taken away by Grand Uncle and the others, and the energy tree gave them a guide fee. The Origin King couldn't help but roll his eyes at Ning Shu. If I say I don't want you to come with me, will you not go? Ning Shu, of course, not. Besides, we're going to help. Looking at you, it seems like we're going to rob you. You want to rob me? Who was the one who went to the abyss to rob me in groups? Are you guys suffering from amnesia? Robbing him was fine, but the worst thing was that they beat him back and forth. It was too hard for him, too bitter. Ning Shu looked at the Origin King's ugly face, waved his hand, and said, we're just asking if you need help. If you don't need it, then forget it. What's with such a big reaction? The Origin King, do you need help? Ning Shu asked. The Origin King gritted his teeth and turned his head away. Yes. It would be a waste not to let them be coolies. The group went to the abyss, and Ning Shu asked, Origin King, don't you have any subordinates in the abyss? No, I only have some things that I didn't take. Ning Shu sighed. He had no money and no people, yet he wanted to become the Void King. Calling himself the Void King. Was it fun? The group went to the abyss, and someone led the way. Ning Shu called out to Jin Ji, who was eating at the back, to make sure he didn't get lost. Ning Shu stared at Jin Ji for a while, then turned to Fatian and said, don't you think Jin Ji seems to have grown taller? Fatian touched his chin, stared at Jin Ji, and then looked at Ning Shu. He seems to have grown taller. Probably his nutrition has caught up. Ning Shu was very happy. This meant that Jin Ji would not become a gluttonous monster. But soon, she realized something, and the smile on her face gradually froze. Then, am I the shortest one? Even the smallest Jean Ji was taller than her. In the team, there was no one shorter than her. Fa Tian added, and the fattest one. Ning Shu. Say goodbye to this beautiful world. I'm going to kill you. Chapter 40-31. This time, he was familiar with the abyss and had come home to get his things. Standing on the edge, there was a frightening darkness below. There was no light, and everything was swallowed up. Ning Shu said, "People say that if you stare at the abyss will also stare at you." Fa Tian said, "This is natural. If you live in the darkness for a long time, you will also become a part of the darkness." Ning Shu nodded. The Origin King became impatient. "What nonsense are you talking about? Just sighing." Ning Shu leaned out, pinched his face, and stuck out his tongue to make a face at the abyss. "Ha ha ha." Turning his head, he said, "The abyss didn't make a face at me." Origin King, what kind of psychopath was this? He took the lead and jumped directly into the abyss. Ning Shu and the other two followed suit. It was so exciting. Falling into the grey fog of the abyss, this grey fog directly dispersed when it encountered the Origin King, as if it was opening a path for him. Moreover, a lot of the fog was absorbed by the Origin King. In the abyss, the Origin King was like a fish in water. He should not be called the Void King, but the Son of the Abyss. At least in the abyss, there were not as many restrictions as in the void. Ning Shu felt that the Origin King should use the abyss as a cornerstone and then develop towards the void, abandoning his advantages and pursuing something that was not suitable for him. This was why the Origin King was so depressed now. In the fog, the Origin King's footsteps did not stop, turning when he should. If it were someone outside, like Ning Shu and the others, they would likely get lost and directly lose their way in the abyss. This black fog seemed to have its own consciousness, flowing and diffusing. As the fog became thicker and thicker, Ning Shu quickened his pace to catch up with the Origin King in front, grabbing the Origin King's clothes to prevent him from getting lost. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation. Then, the Origin King was like an old hen, followed by a string of chicks. Origin King, don't worry, even if you get lost, I can still find you. You don't have to do this. Ning Shu shook his head. No, we have to watch you. What are you looking at me for? I'm going back to my own home, do I need you to watch me? The Origin King said angrily. The fog here was getting thicker and thicker because there was a hole that was continuously emitting smoke. Furthermore, there were grey crystals condensed around the hole, which were scattered messily on the ground. Ning Shu casually picked up a crystal and pinched it. It was very hard. He secretly stuck out his tongue and licked it. There was no taste, just like a crystal. Start picking them up, what are you standing there for? The Origin King directed Ning Shu. Ning Shu played with the crystal and asked, what's the use of this thing? It's useless to others, but it's very useful to me. And, it can be considered as my food, the Origin King said. When Jean Ji heard that it was food, he immediately grabbed the crystal and stuffed it into his mouth. The crunching sounds were very crisp and Ning Shu felt her teeth hurt. The Origin King should have been absorbing this grey mist from the crystal he had bitten. Ning Shu began to bend down to pick up the crystals. There were a lot of crystals here, and they were piled up everywhere. Ning Shu asked, why don't you just absorb the fog? How convenient. The Origin King, then why don't you just eat grass? My food also needs to be processed, okay? Ning Shu, I say, you have a bad temper. Are you trying to take it too seriously? I think, the Origin King, just listen to me, you don't need to express any opinions. Just listen to me on this matter. If I think it's okay, then it's okay. You don't need to think about it. Ning Shu, is there something wrong with your brain? A lot of crystals were collected, enough for the Origin King to eat for a long time. Since entering the abyss, the Origin King's face had been ugly, as if he had eaten shit. When passing by the magma, the Origin King jumped in directly, seemingly wanting to take a bath. As soon as he jumped in, he merged with the magma, making it impossible to find him. The level of the magma dropped a little. It seemed that the Origin King had integrated some of the magma into his body. Ning Shu felt that even if the Origin King nagged all day long, the void still doted on him. This kind of physique was simply unique. In any case, Ning Shu felt that he was the kind of person who had been abandoned. He was born without a complete body, not even having meridians. To be precise, Ning Shu was not born in the void at all. At most, he was an artificial void creature. I made myself, is that okay? The Origin King took a bath, got up, and dripped magma. Further ahead was a forest. This forest was Ning Shu and Jin Ji's favorite place. Why? Because there were many fruits here that were particularly delicious and rich in energy. Before the Origin King could speak, Ning Shu and Jin Ji rushed into the forest. As soon as they entered the forest, many pairs of eyes immediately looked at them. Ning Shu stopped, looked at the people in the forest, and then turned his head to look at the fruit trees. All the fruit trees had been abused, and there was nothing left. How ruthless! Not a single fruit was left behind. Ning Shu said to the Origin King, who had walked into the forest, "Your house has been searched." They had brought a large army to search his house. The Origin King's face was very ugly as he rebuked Ning Shu, "I know, why are you being so loud? I knew it from the moment I entered the abyss." They had gone too far. After taking away the spring, they still wanted to take away these things. Everything in the abyss belonged to him. Ning Shu said to Fragrant Wind Man, "You're going too far, entering someone's house and plundering their things." Fragrant Wind Man said directly, "It's useless to tell me. Go find Sang Liang and the others. I'm just an errand boy." Ning Shu clicked his tongue, shrugged his shoulders, and asked the Origin King, "What should we do now?" "You're really going too far." The Origin King sighed. His expression twisted for a moment before returning to normal. He squatted down and pointed at the ground. At first, it was still calm, but after a few seconds, the ground began to shake violently. It became more and more violent, and the violent shaking made it difficult for people to stand still. Cracks began to appear on the ground, and the cracks grew bigger and bigger, almost destroying the fruit forest. A hand stretched out from the cracks, and another hand also stretched out, grabbing the ground. With the help of the two stone hands, a stone man climbed out of the cracks. This stone man's entire body was made of rocks, and there was moss growing on the rocks. Its entire body was wet. As soon as the stone man appeared, it bowed its head to the Origin King to show its respect. The Origin King pointed at Fragrant Wind Man's group and said fiercely, "Kill them." It was bad enough that they broke in once, but they still wanted to plunder the ground. This was too ugly, too much bullying. The Origin King felt very wronged. It was bad enough that he was wronged in the void, but now, even his own house was invaded as if no one was there. They even took his food and drink. He was so angry. Chapter 40-32. The stone golem did not say anything. Following the order, it raised its fist and smashed it at Fragrant Wind and the others. Fragrant Wind and the others were in soul form, so they were as light as a feather. Facing such an attack, they could easily dodge it. The problem was, so what if they dodged? The stone golem attacked them tirelessly. After receiving the order, it had to complete the order before it could retract its fist. Although the stone golem was very big, its movements were very agile. If the Divine Stone Clan had such agile movements, they would not have to desperately accumulate defensive power on their bodies. The orchard was completely destroyed. Ning Shu looked at the fallen fruit trees and felt his heart ache. Can you not fight here? These trees have all fallen. It's too distressing. Jin Ji agreed with Ning Shu. Yes, distressing. The Origin King immediately retorted and scolded Ning Shu. I don't feel distressed, so why are you feeling distressed? Do I need you to feel distressed? You are no different from these people, always thinking about my things. Only good things are coveted. If no one covets them, they are trash. Do you want your things to be coveted or not coveted? Ning Shu calmly retorted. The Origin King was speechless. This is a fallacy. It is a fallacy. Coveting other people's things and saying that only good things are coveted. Do you think I want you to covet them? Whether my things are good or trash, it is not up to you to covet them. Ning Shu frowned and looked at him. I'm afraid you have lost your mind. Why are you attacking me? Go and attack them. Do you think I am easy to bully, so you are venting your anger on me? Ning Shu raised his fist. I am your guide, not your punching bag. Besides, I am here to help you. Since you are so against it, I think we should leave. When the Origin King was born, he had been beaten up by Ning Shu and Grand Elder one after another. Now that Fragrant Wind Man and the others had appeared to plunder his family's property, both sides had appeared at the same time. He couldn't suppress his anger no matter what he did. The subordinate asked Fragrant Wind, this stone golem is very difficult to deal with. Should we retreat temporarily? Fragrant Wind dodged the stone golem's attack while using the wooden prop to open the wooden prop. This kind of attack could directly penetrate the stone golem's body. Translator, Timothy_editor, Globeglotter. Even if the stone golem's body was pierced through, the hole would quickly be glued back together, making their attacks useless. Even if the rocks on the stone man's body were broken, the broken rocks would gather back on the stone man's body, but they wouldn't be able to turn back into big rocks. It was indeed difficult to deal with. The stone golem's attack wasn't that powerful, but it was annoying and disgusting. Fortunately, the stone golem wasn't attacking him, or else he would have a mental breakdown. For someone like the stone golem, unless one had the strength to crush it into powder, they would just be harassed endlessly. Fragrant Wind shook his head. No, there are energy waves and energy bodies here. Our mission has not been completed yet. But with this thing. The subordinate wanted to say something but hesitated. With the stone man pestering them like this, it would not be easy for them to complete their mission. Void King Chi. These people had broken into his home. Now that he was angry, he directly jumped into the crack. Seeing this, Ning Shu and the others quickly jumped in. Jin Ji was the last to go. Seeing a fruit on the ground, he hesitated for a moment. He picked up the fruit and wiped it on his clothes, took a bite, and jumped into the crack. Fragrant Wind had been paying attention to Ning Shu and the others. Seeing this, he immediately said to his subordinate, "Follow." He jumped into the crack. The others jumped into the crack like dumplings. The stone golem, who had no target to attack, also jumped in. Below the crack was an underground world. It was full of complicated paths and caves, and there were also some unknown creatures that they had never seen before. Ning Shu used his mental power to scan and felt a headache. There were too many roads and twists and turns. If he stayed in them, he would definitely die of exhaustion. Who was the one who built the underground maze? The stone golem chased after Fragrant Wind and the others. Even from a distance, they could feel the vibrations. The ceiling above their heads was shaking to the point of dust and soil. They did not expect the bottom of the abyss to be like this, and the area was very large. The abyss was really a treasure. They thought it was so big, but suddenly there was another layer below. It was not that Void King did not have a foundation. In fact, he had a very good foundation. The Origin King familiarly led Ning Shu's group through many twists and turns, causing the people behind them to feel a little dizzy. Ning Shu asked, "Where are we going?" Fragrant Wind and the others were probably lost now, being chased around by the stone golems. Void King did not speak and came to a spacious place. Because it was underground, there was no light and torches were lit around. When everyone saw this, their eyes almost jumped out of their sockets. This place was full of energy bodies. The energy tree from before was just a drop in the ocean. This scene was undoubtedly a large-scale treasure scene. Ning Shu sighed. Void King was really a rich second generation. There were a lot of energy bodies here. Fragrant Wind and the others were probably looking for them. Previously, Liwen went to harass the organization, so the materials consumed in the battle had to be replenished. It was reasonable to come here to find energy bodies. Unfortunately, it might be a little difficult for them to get out. When Jin Ji saw the energy bodies, he immediately rushed over and stuffed them into his mouth desperately. However, he did not eat much. Void King did not care how much he ate. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation, what are you waiting for? Load them up, Void King said to Ning Shu. You came to help, but you didn't move. What's wrong with you? Ning Shu snorted and began to load the energy bodies one by one. This feeling was really strange, as if he was lying on money. However, Void King's expression was not good. Sooner or later, I will get the spring back. Granduncle took away the eye of the abyss. The spring water coming out of the spring was full of vitality. Ning Shu hesitated for a while. It would be a bit difficult to get the spring water back. Snatching something from Granduncle's hands was probably more difficult than killing him. Ning Shu and Fa Tian's gazes probably stimulated Void King. You don't believe me, I will definitely get it back, humph. Ning Shu was very tired from loading the energy bodies and asked, do you want to take away all the energy bodies here? No need, leave some for the creatures of the abyss to eat. Alright, there's no need to load them up, most of them were left behind. Ning Shu could not help but ask, where did all these energy bodies come from? There were too many of them, too awesome. It was very difficult to find energy bodies in the void, but here they were in piles. Could it be that all the energy bodies in the void were here? Sure enough, Void King was the chosen one. Chapter 40-33. The Origin King was not someone with no money, but it seemed that these creatures would not follow him out of the abyss. Inside the abyss, the Origin King was the absolute master, but outside the abyss, he was nothing more than a smelly little brother. If he went out, he would be wronged. Where else could they have come from? Of course they were collected slowly, the Origin King said angrily, did they just fall from the sky? Sure enough, money made people bold. Just look at the Origin King, look at his appearance after returning to the abyss, it was as if he wanted to poke someone with his chin. Ning Shu threw the bag aside, I'm not going to pack them, whoever wants to pack them can pack them. The Origin King said flatly, I'll give you half a bag of energy bodies. Ning Shu knelt down instantly, thank you, father, I'll pack them now. I'm willing to submit to the evil power of money. Jin Ji ate a lot of energy bodies, but in the end, her speed slowed down and she helped pack them up. Obviously, she was aiming for half a bag of energy bodies. Ning Shu asked, is it okay to leave the rest of the energy bodies here? Leaving them behind was for Fragrance Man and the others. To be honest, even if these energy bodies were not his, Ning Shu still felt suffocated when he thought of them falling into the hands of Fragrance Man and the others. Just thinking about it made him feel suffocated. The Origin King sneered, leave them behind. Stop daydreaming, these people still owe my big brother something. The Origin King was worried about his own spring and vowed to return to it. However, Ning Shu felt that even if he returned to the spring, there was probably not much vitality left in it. Of course, he would not tell the Origin King about this so that the Origin King would have a goal to strive for. Perhaps the vitality of the spring still existed, and if he did not see it, he would not have the right to speak. After packing up the energy bodies, the Origin King clapped his hands and a number of black, fist-sized creatures appeared from all directions. Their bodies were pitch black and it was impossible to tell what they were. Chattering noisily, they quickly moved a large amount of energy bodies away. Their speed was so fast that all the energy bodies disappeared in the blink of an eye. Ning Shu clutched his chest, almost unable to breathe. There were so many energy bodies. Ning Shu asked, "What kind of creature is that?" "Oh, these energy bodies were found by them. I'll take some of them and leave the rest to them," the Origin King said lightly. To be honest, the Origin King did not care much about energy bodies, but when he went out for a walk, he discovered that without any energy bodies, it was difficult to even take a single step. If he were to encounter any problems in the future, would he be as passive as he was now if he just threw out a bunch of energy? The Origin King started throwing money around. Ning Shu narrowed his eyes and stared at the pitch-black creature. It was very small, like a mouse. Could it be that this creature was very similar to the little mouse? But one lives underground. Are these creatures looking for energy bodies? What kind of precious race was this? They are good at living underground and like to hoard things, but they still like to eat energy bodies the most. They will contribute some energy bodies to me. Ning Shu was unable to maintain his smile. This was called merely contributing some energy. That's a lot, okay? Ning Shu took out an energy body from his pocket and was about to take a bite when he found that he really could not eat energy bodies, nor could he absorb this kind of energy. Then what was he going to rely on to grow up? Was it so difficult to grow up as a pseudo-void creature? He couldn't be a child for the rest of his life, could he? Ning Shu felt extremely uncomfortable. She gave the remaining energy body to Jin Ji. Jin Ji took it and swallowed it with a crunching sound. Ning Shu looked very sad. What kind of situation was this? Fa Tian thought for a while and said, "You probably have to grow up together with the peerless martial art. The peerless martial art will feed back its energy to you, don't worry." Ning Shu's expression instantly became extremely frightened. Grow up together? Does that mean I'll have to stay like this for a long time? If the peerless martial art grew old in the future, she would also become an old lady. However, that was a very distant matter. Ning Shu only wanted to become a girl now, a young and lively girl. This was a very uncomfortable thing because she did not know when she would grow up. Then what was the use of losing weight? She should just give up on herself and smash a broken jar. Fa Tian gave Ning Shu an idea, "Why don't you ask the granduncle? He was also born in the birthplace of this plane." Ning Shu looked at Fa Tian, "Are you serious?" "Of course I'm joking." Fa Tian laughed, "You even believe this? If you really go and ask, you'll be sending yourself to someone's doorstep to be slaughtered. You, very good, beast." She was already like this, but Fa Tian was still joking about her. Fa Tian patted Ning Shu's head, "Actually, there's another person you can ask." Ning Shu pushed Fa Tian's hand away and asked angrily, "Who? Doesn't the granduncle have a younger brother?" "You can ask his younger brother," Fa Tian said. Ning Shu rolled her eyes. "Minister Zhengqing, you probably don't even have a corpse left now. Anyway, he could just give up the treatment." Ning Shu was the saddest. If he had an accident and died, then he would be a child for the rest of his life. That would be too sad. Ning Shu asked the Void King, "What else do you want to take away?" The Void King, "Spring's Eye." Ning Shu, "Give up, your Spring's Eye is gone." The Void King, "Then there's nothing to take." Ning Shu, "Why don't you take some people out? That way, you'll have people around you." The Void King was silent for a long time before finally shaking his head, "No, they all live in the abyss. I can't change their living environment." Ning Shu, "Keep it simple, keep it simple." The Void King, "I can't find anyone. They respect me here, but they won't follow me to the outside world. Ning Shu nodded. So, you're still alone. There was only money, no people, and no one to rely on. Then should we leave? Ning Shu asked. The underground world was quite depressing, and he felt like it was difficult to breathe. Even from a distance, they could hear the stone man still fighting tirelessly with the fragrant wind man. Yang Kai didn't know how long the fight would last, and even if he got rid of the stone man, he would still be lost in various underground holes. The Void King nodded. Okay, let's go. The Void King took Ning Shu directly out of a passage, and when they returned to the surface, they found that the gap in the orchard had closed. Ning Shu. Then how did they come out? They were directly buried underground, and there was even a stone man chasing after them. It was really miserable, so Yang Kai wanted to light a candle for them. Is there only one exit? Ning Shu asked. The Origin King smiled insincerely. Yes, there's only one exit. Ning Shu, his scalp went numb. Chapter 40-34. Finding the exit in these crisscrossing tunnels was simply too difficult, and there was even a stone man to increase the difficulty of clearing this place. It was simply hellish. To be honest, seeing Fragrant Wind Man so miserable, Yang Kai really couldn't help but feel happy. Originally, he had come here to find the energy bodies, but now that they had no energy bodies, they couldn't even leave and had to be tempered by the stone man. It was really comforting. The Origin King still went to take a look at the dried-up spring. Even without the spring, there was still plenty of vitality left here. The Origin King's face was very ugly. This was the energy for his growth, and now it was taken away just like that. What would happen if he grew up deformed in the future? His current strength wasn't very good, but when he became truly strong, he would truly possess an immortal body. Those dregs could beat him. What nonsense were they talking about? All of them were bandits, all of them were beasts. Ning Shu asked, is the spring important? Origin King, what's not important here? Do you think it's not important? Ning Shu decided to never talk to the Origin King again, at least not in the abyss. As soon as the Origin King entered the abyss, he was very confident and arrogant. This was probably his own territory. Once they left, the Origin King's attitude would definitely change. Outside, he had to be humble, but in his own territory, he didn't need to be polite. She would never ask again, who cares? Outside the abyss, the bright light was a bit dazzling, so Ning Shu suddenly said, how about we wait a little longer? The Origin King glanced sideways at Ning Shu and asked, wait for what? Ning Shu just snorted and didn't speak, not intending to talk to the Origin King. Since you asked, I have to answer. Origin King, he took out a fist-sized cloth bag and shook it loudly. What was inside? It was all energy bodies. From his face, Ning Shu could see the arrogance and willfulness of a rich man. What are you waiting for? Tell me and these energy bodies will be yours, Fation snorted. Ning Shu snorted, let me tell you, I'm not a person who will bow for 5 buckets of rice. If 5 buckets wasn't enough, it had to be at least 8. You're willing to take out such a small thing? Ning Shu said disdainfully. Is my personality that cheap? The Void King was not used to this bad habit of hers. Do you want it or not? If you don't want it, then forget it. In any case, I don't really want to know. Ning Shu waved at Fation. Come down. I'll tell you something interesting. We won't tell him. Fation really wanted to roll his eyes at Ning Shu, but he still bent down and put his ear next to Ning Shu's mouth. He even threatened, it better be something interesting. If it's not, I'll blow your head off. Ning Shu. What kind of people are these? I say, let's wait here. Fragrant Wind and the others will send out a distress signal, right? If we wait here, we'll be able to wait for reinforcements. When the time comes, we'll get more people into the maze below. Wouldn't it be interesting to have so many people groping around in the maze? Fation, heh, you think it's interesting. The Void King on the other side was very curious, but he still maintained a very cold posture. He didn't even look over here, completely uninterested. As Heaven Punisher spoke, he tilted his body slightly towards them. Ning Shu, of course, if the underground maze is stable enough, it will definitely be able to resist for a while. If it's a shoddy construction, then there's nothing we can do. The Void King couldn't help but ask, what are you talking about? Ning Shu stretched out his hand and rolled his eyes at the Void King. This time, he took out a small bag of energy bodies. Ning Shu accepted it with satisfaction. The quality of your underground maze is not bad. The Void King, I didn't participate in its construction, so how would I know if it's good or not? Ning Shu really wanted to jump up and smash his head. Can you not be so stubborn? Are you a reincarnation of a stubborn person? This old lady doesn't want to talk to you. The Void King asked, so what if the quality is good, and so what if it's not? Ning Shu, if the quality is good, then it can be destroyed in one wave. If the quality is not good, then it's better to quickly release the people inside. The Void King, release my ass. Ning Shu said, the one locked inside, the leader, still has some status in the organization. He has powerful weapons on him and may make a mess of the underground world. Even if he doesn't have any skills and doesn't have powerful weapons on him, he will ask for help. When the time comes, the people who come will also be very powerful, and the underground world will still be destroyed. At that time, the unlucky ones will think that it's a creature from the abyss. It took a lot of effort to build this underground world. It's very likely that it will be destroyed, and the creatures inside will also suffer. Destruction was much easier than creation. If the underground world is done well, maybe it can cause some trouble for Senior Uncle and the others, and you can also let out a sigh of relief. However, even if the underground world was very strong and unusual, if a fight broke out, it would definitely be affected. The Void King's expression was like that of a dog. It's so annoying. I really want to kill them. Ning Shu smiled. I also want to kill them, but some things can't be changed by human will. The Void King thought for a while and finally said decadently, forget it, don't lose a city. It's meaningless to give them some trouble. The loss is too great. If he could directly kill Senior Uncle, this loss would be bearable, but the problem was that he couldn't kill him. The Void King jumped into the abyss, obviously to release the people. Looking at his face, it was needless to say how aggrieved and uncomfortable he was. As soon as the Void King left, Ning Shu opened his bag, which was filled with colorful energy bodies. It was really easy to earn energy bodies from the Void King. It was simply like throwing money away. Ning Shu gave the bag to Fation and said, here, take it. I don't need this kind of thing. He felt very depressed when he thought that he would always be a child on the heavenly mountain. Fation accepted the energy body and comforted Ning Shu. It's not too late to lose weight. His feet moved, and the entire abyss trembled. He didn't know what was happening below. It didn't take long for the Void King to return, followed by a group of souls. The leader, Fragrant Wind, was very embarrassed. His clothes and hair were covered with mud, and his face was also covered with mud. TSK, it was really rare to see such a narcissistic Fragrant Wind in such a sorry state. The fragrance on his body mixed into a particularly complex smell. Ning Shu said to him, you should thank me. If I hadn't convinced him, the Master of the Abyss wouldn't have let you out. He planned to lock you up until you die. Translator, Henyi Translations Editor, Henyi Translations. The Void King was very flattering. Yes, it's all for his sake. Fragrant Wind calmly shook off the mud on his body. You're not being kind, you're just afraid of Senior Uncle. Chapter 40-35. It's true that you're afraid of Grand Uncle, but it's wrong for you to say it. Otherwise, Fragrant Wind Guy would still be stuck in the underground world with the stone golem and would have to find a way out in the crisscrossing tunnels. Ning Shu's expression changed, and he said to Hollow King, "Take it, don't be polite." Fragrant Wind Guy raised his hands. "Okay, it's my fault, I said the wrong thing." In the face of this situation, Fragrant Wind Guy was terrified and admitted his mistake very quickly. He didn't force it at all and didn't feel embarrassed at all. Ning Shu felt that Fragrant Wind Guy was also a very flexible person. Ning Shu asked indifferently, "What's wrong with you?" "I'm indeed afraid of Grand Uncle, and you're not wrong." Fragrant Wind Guy was speechless. Sure enough, he couldn't offend a girl, especially a narrow-minded girl. Ning Shu said, "If you don't make it clear, you'll have to go down and continue to play with the stone golem. Although Grand Uncle and the others will come, you'll have to suffer for a while." She was eager to kick Fragrant Wind Guy and the others into the abyss again. They should suffer more in there. You don't have an energy body, so all your efforts were in vain and you had to suffer. Fragrant Wind Guy sighed and was once again sure that this girl definitely didn't like him and would target him crazily when she met him. Fragrant Wind Guy said straightforwardly, "I didn't know how to appreciate kindness. You were the one who helped me, but I said something I shouldn't have said. I hurt your heart." Ning Shu frowned. Why was it so awkward? However, Ning Shu was too lazy to care about this matter. You broke into someone's home and robbed their property, but the master of the abyss still repaid evil with good. What should you do? Fragrant Wind Guy blinked, looking quite confused, and asked, "What should I do?" Ning Shu took a deep breath. "Could it be that you've been with Grand Uncle for too long? You don't have Grand Uncle's strength, but you have Grand Uncle's arrogance. Or do you think you can succeed under Grand Uncle's protection? Do you think Grand Uncle will avenge you if you die?" The Taishu had the ability to be arrogant. He had snatched other people's things, made them speechless, and trampled on other people's faces. But Fragrant Wind Guy didn't. "What did you take?" "Obediently return it." Ning Shu was still thinking about the fruits in the orchard. Those fruits were very delicious. Instead of giving it to Fragrant Wind Man and the others, he might as well keep it for himself and give it to Void King. Whatever the Origin King left behind, they could also benefit from it. Fragrant Wind said, "We didn't get anything. We just came to the abyss not long ago, and you came." Ning Shu's expression was as if he had eaten shit. "Bullshit, do you think I'm blind? All the fruits in the orchard were plucked clean by you, and you still say you didn't take anything. Can you not lie through your teeth? Otherwise, don't even think about leaving today." Ning Shu threatened. "I'll leave it here today." Fa Tian stood beside Ning Shu and puffed out his chest, cheering for Ning Shu. The Origin King was infuriated. These people would feel distressed even if they plucked a blade of grass from the abyss, thinking of the spring. "Hand it over, or I'll kill you." Void King's words were even more direct. Fragrant Wind Man raised his brow. They had encountered a robbery, so whether he would hand it over or not was a problem. His subordinates were also waiting for Fragrant Wind Man's orders, but in terms of numbers, there were only 4 people on the other side. This scene was simply too ugly. Taking out their things would be a disgrace. Fragrant Wind Man took out his messen space and threw it to Ning Shu. "Everything is inside." Ning Shu caught the messen space and looked inside. "There are some fruits inside. The entire messen space is filled with the fragrance of fruits." Ning Shu was very satisfied in his heart, but on the surface, he said arrogantly, "At least you know what's good for you." Fragrant Wind Man didn't say anything else and was about to leave with his subordinates. Ning Shu stopped Fragrant Wind Man and said, "For better or worse, I saved you and helped you. Aren't you going to say thank you to me? Where's the etiquette between people?" Ning Shu said bitterly. Fragrant Wind Man raised his head at a 45-degree angle. Yes, etiquette between people. He had taken someone else's things and now he had to be thanked. Ning Shu stared at Fragrant Wind Man and blinked. "Say it." Fragrant Wind Man didn't want to be entangled with them and directly said, "Thank you." Ning Shu snorted and shook his head. "Are you thanking me or taking revenge? Why are you gritting your teeth? You're not sincere enough." Fragrant Wind Man's expression suddenly became very sincere, and his tone was full of emotion. Thank you from the bottom of my heart." Ning Shu waved his hand. "No need to thank me. It's normal to draw a sword to help when seeing injustice." He had indeed drawn a sword to help, but who this sword was aimed at was unknown. Fragrant Wind Man turned around and left with his subordinates, looking very confident from the back. As for what he was thinking, Ning Shu didn't know, nor did he care. Finally, there was fruit to eat. They had gained a lot on this trip, but Fragrant Wind Man and the others had lost everything. After tossing and turning for a while, they still had nothing. Ning Shu gave the Messin space to Origin King, but Origin King didn't accept it. "You don't want it? Here." Before Ning Shu could say thank you, Origin King snatched it back. "When I need your help with something, I'll give it to you." Origin King finally understood that this guy wouldn't act until he saw a rabbit. Even if you couldn't take his things, if you gave him something, he would gladly accept it. But now, he had just given it away. It was too much of a loss. Ning Shu rolled his eyes. "If you don't want to give it to me, then don't give it to me. Who cares?" Che. With nothing else to do, the group returned to the clan. Shan Yu was squatting in front of the clan, seemingly waiting for someone. When he saw Ning Shu, he immediately got up. Ning Shu was still puzzled, as it was rare to see Shan Yu not sleeping. Shan Yu said to the four of them, "Quickly go back and take a look. Someone came to your house and is waiting for you." Being stared at like a tiger watching its prey made it difficult for him to sleep. Ning Shu frowned and asked, "Who is it?" "Shan Yu, I don't know him." Ning Shu hurried to the clan and saw a person sitting in the wooden house. It was Li Wen. Ning Shu adjusted his expression, then walked in and said with a smile, "Brother Li Wen." Li Wen saw Ning Shu and just nodded enigmatically. Ning Shu was depressed and puzzled. This guy was just throwing his face at his house. If he had something to say, just say it. Since he didn't say much, Ning Shu rambled on. "When did you come?" "I had something to do and went out. If I knew you would come, I wouldn't have gone out. Next time, if you want to come, just say hello. I'll wait for you at home." It was rude to come rashly, and he didn't even bring a gift. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.